Hello everyone. Today, we will learn about another case. The case of Zachary Davis. Zachary Everett Davis was 15 years old when he committed a particularly cold-blooded and senseless murder. Just a couple of years later, he gained notoriety on the internet after a chilling interview with Dr. Phil McGraw. In that interview, he details the murder, what he felt, and what was going on in his mind. The Davis family lived in Hendersonville, Tennessee. The family included Chris, the father, Melanie, the mother, and their two sons, Josh and Zachary, who were just a year apart in age. This close age made them more like best friends than typical brothers, as they spent a lot of time together playing and hanging out. Overall, the Davis family appeared to be happy and normal, except for Zachary, the younger son, who was a challenging child. He was quiet, shy, and emotionally distant, often displaying obsessive behaviors due to his sadness. Then, as Zachary grew a bit older, some strange symptoms began to manifest, and it became clear that he was suffering from a mental illness. This situation was a significant challenge for both Zachary and his family, but they persevered and sought help from various specialists. In 2009, Chris Davis, the father of the family, passed away from motor neuron disease, also known as ALS. This degenerative condition affects muscle control, leading to a gradual loss of movement over time. Individuals with ALS often become unable to walk and may need a wheelchair. The disease also impacts speech, making it slurred and difficult to understand, and in some cases, it can completely rob patients of their ability to speak. Witnessing a loved one endure this painful decline is incredibly challenging. Unfortunately, the Davis family underwent this firsthand as they watched Chris decline until his death. This experience deeply affected the entire family, especially Zachary, who was very close to his father. After his father's passing, Zachary's behavior changed significantly. He became withdrawn and fell into depression. His mental health worsened, making daily life a struggle. He was hospitalized multiple times. He was diagnosed with early-onset schizophrenia and depression stemming from his loss. A psychotherapist was assigned to him, and Zachary attended 4 therapy sessions before he stopped going, since he was only 12 at the time. His mother, Melanie, took him to the appointments for reasons unknown. She eventually decided to discontinue the therapy sessions and instead began taking him to a doctor. Whether Zachary resisted therapy or his mother was too busy, he ultimately received no support for his mental health issues despite his challenges. Zachary made an effort to lead a normal life. He attended school, but he rarely interacted with anyone there. While he went to class, his classmates found him odd because he never initiated conversations. For instance, if someone smiled at him, he wouldn't smile back. He would simply look away. He only spoke when absolutely necessary, such as when a teacher addressed him or when an important question was asked. When he did talk, his voice was very soft, almost a whisper. As if he were hesitant to join the conversation, Zachary had no friends. Likely because he did not enjoy socializing or meeting new people, his only close companion was his older brother, Josh. They played and spent a lot of time together before their father's death. After Chris's death, Zachary became withdrawn and seemed to prefer that state. His classmates noticed that he wore the same hoodie every day and often kept the hood up when he was outside, which displayed unusual behavior. Unlike his brother, Josh, who was active, participated in sports, had many friends, and frequently attended parties, Zachary chose to isolate himself in his bedroom. He showed little interest in going outside or engaging in a lively, varied life. He did enjoy reading and watching movies, especially horror films, which were his favorite genre. He also had a fascination with true crime documentaries and became overly engrossed in real-life criminal cases, sometimes idolizing the criminals. This interest was unhealthy. While watching crime films, Zachary exhibited no empathy for the victims and instead became captivated by the killers. Viewing them as role models, he kept multiple notebooks because he loved to write and draw. One of these notebooks was always with him and served as a diary where he recorded his feelings and daily experiences. When Zachary turned 14, he told his mother that he had started hearing voices. Specifically, there was one voice he heard every night that caused him so much stress he could hardly sleep. This voice belonged to his deceased father and said many distressing things. Concerned, Melanie took Zachary to a psychiatrist. Unfortunately, his condition only worsened initially. Zachary only heard the voice at night when he was trying to sleep, but eventually it began to occur all the time, and he found himself constantly talking to it over the next few years. Zachary's mental health continued to decline, and he did not receive adequate support, although he had a diagnosis. He did not attend regular therapy sessions and likely wasn't on any medication after the loss of Chris. Melanie tried to balance work and household responsibilities while spending quality time with her sons. She worked hard to create a sense of normalcy in their lives by organizing family activities and planning fun outings. On August 10, 2012, Melanie took her sons to the movies, and they all had a wonderful time. After the movie, they returned home late and went to bed, however. Zachary had different plans for the night. He packed a backpack with notepads, pens, a toothbrush, a change of clothes, a ski mask, gloves, a hammer, and a knife. He then zipped up the backpack and went to the garage to retrieve a heavy sledgehammer that the family kept there. Around 11 p.m., Zachary picked up the sledgehammer and walked to his mother's bedroom. He paused at the door. Looking at his mother, was asleep, with the lights off. In that moment, he felt completely clear-headed. He approached her, lifted the sledgehammer, and began to strike her repeatedly with all his strength. He did this with such brute force that her blood splashed all over the room. The force of the blows caved in his mother's skull. Zachary recounted that his mother regained consciousness after the first or second blow, but she couldn't speak. Instead, she started to have convulsions during this time. Her eyes were open, and Zachary glanced into her eyes while he struck her with the sledgehammer, even though his mother was looking at him. She was unaware of her surroundings or what was occurring. Zachary admitted that throughout the violent attack on his mother, he was laughing, describing it as joyful laughter. 15-year-old Zachary brutally killed his mother in just a few minutes, however. He had more planned. His older brother, Josh, who was 16 at the time, was asleep in his bedroom after killing their mother. Zachary went downstairs with a bloody sledgehammer, leaving a trail of blood in the hallway before leaving the weapon in the laundry room. There are conflicting reports about what he did next. Some say he took gasoline, while others claim he grabbed whiskey or another flammable liquid. Zachary then returned to his mother's bedroom and began pouring the liquid everywhere. He also soaked the game room upstairs with the flammable liquid. After setting fires in both rooms, he took a pre-packed backpack and left, allowing the house to burn along with his mother's body and his still-living brother. Zachary's plan went horribly wrong. He wanted the house fire to destroy any evidence of his crime and to eliminate his brother. However, he made a critical error by setting the fires in 2 rooms and then closing the doors. This restricted the fire's spread, causing the smoke alarms to activate immediately. The noise of the alarms woke Josh. He jumped out of bed and rushed to his mother's bedroom. When he opened the door, he was met with a horrifying sight. His mother lying on the bed, covered in blood. In that moment, Josh realized he couldn't save her. She was already dead. Frantic, he ran out of the house to a neighbor's home and called 911. It's hard to fathom what must have been racing through Josh's mind. Everything unfolded so quickly. He woke to the fire alarm, discovered the blaze, and rushed to help his mother, only to find her lifeless body. The sequence of events unfolded rapidly, demonstrating how effectively the brain processes such situations. Emergency services arrived at the scene and extinguished the fire. Unfortunately, Melanie Davis was declared dead on sight, and the police began questioning Josh about what had happened. He immediately informed them that his younger brother, Zachary, who was gravely ill, was missing. Zachary had not been in the house during the fire. prompting the police to issue a missing persons report for him. This information was dispatched to all local police officers, and search teams quickly began their efforts. Knowing that Zachary could not have wandered far, he was located the following morning. About 10 miles from home, the police concluded that as soon as he left the house, he just kept walking, stopping occasionally to make entries in his notebook. When found, Zachary was covered in blood and was still wearing the same clothes in which he had killed his mother, although he had a change of clothes in his bag. It's unclear why he didn't use them. This aided the search since the police recognized him immediately. They knew he was the suspect and arrested him, taking him to the police station. There, Zachary Davis confessed to murdering his mother and believed his brother had died in the house fire. He intended to kill both his brother and mother, leaving home under the belief that his plan had completely succeeded. During the police interrogation, Zachary was cooperative, providing all the required information and answering every question. However, he showed no signs of guilt or remorse. He appeared cold and indifferent when recounting his actions. He spoke in a way that suggested he felt no emotions whatsoever. When investigators asked Zachary why he committed the act, he stated that he believed his mother deserved to die because she was not a good mother. He felt she had not properly cared for him and his brothers. Zachary said that she made him and his brother do everything around the house, including washing and cooking. He also said that they essentially had to raise themselves, which likely started around the time their father died. Zachary thought it would be futile to communicate his feelings to her. He believed that bringing up his concerns, expressing himself, or attempting to change her behavior would be pointless because he thought she would not listen. As a result, he believed his only solution was to kill her. However, this was not the only reason for the murder. Zachary also experienced distress because he heard the voice of his deceased father every night, which prevented him from sleeping. This voice communicated dreadful things to him. The voice Zachary heard primarily spoke about his mother, Melanie, claiming she was bad and deserved to die. This is what the voice, which Zachary believed to be his father's, conveyed to him, leading him to think that Melanie should die. When the police asked Zachary how long he had been hearing these voices, he said they had been in his head for a long time. Zachary admitted he hadn't planned it for long. He had the idea and organized everything on the same day, carrying it out just a few hours later. He may have even decided to do it before they went to the movies, despite claiming that the idea was spontaneous. Zachary's resentment towards his mother had been building up for quite a while. Zachary explained in his interview with Dr. Phil McGraw that he chose the day of the incident because he was free and saw it as a good opportunity to act. During the interview, Dr. Phil asked Zachary what it sounded like when he struck his mother with a hammer, and in a chilling moment, Zachary smiled and described the sound as a wet, dull thud. He laughed several times throughout the conversation. Dr. Phil remarked that such laughter is often a sign of nervousness rather than malicious enjoyment. Regardless, Zachary's laughter came across as unsettling. He claimed to love his mother. Though his sincerity was questionable, he acknowledged that they were not close and rarely communicated. Yet there was no animosity between them. The case shocking not only to the public, but also to those who knew the Davis family. While many were aware that Zachary struggled with mental illness, no one expected him to commit such an act against his mother. Zachary also mentioned that he never truly argued with his mother. Instead, he preferred to withdraw during conflicts. So why did he label her a bad mother if there was no real tension? According to him, their mother simply stopped being a mother to them. However, his relationship with his older brother Josh was even worse than his relationship with his mother. Although very few knew about this from the outside, they seemed like best friends during his teenage years. Zachary claimed that Josh abused him severely, even while their mother was at home. It's important to note that Josh was never charged or convicted of any crime, and Josh firmly denies these allegations. He defended himself during a hearing when Zachary's claims were brought up in court as a reason for Zachary's desire to harm him. In court, Josh reiterated that these incidents never occurred. No evidence supports these claims, but it would be challenging to find proof, even if they were true. Zachary claims that this incident significantly influenced his decision to kill his mother. He felt anger towards Melanie. Believing she should have protected him, he felt let down by her because she was in the house when Josh harmed him but did nothing to intervene. She didn't even notice. It seemed to Zachary that she didn't care, and he allegedly tried to tell his mother what Josh had done. But she didn't want to hear it. Zachary wrote in his diary that she wouldn't listen to him and that she never believed him. She got angry every time he brought up the subject. She yelled at him, saying he was lying. This was one of the few topics they argued about. As they generally did not have many disagreements or conflicts within the family, Zachary revealed that the violence he experienced deeply affected him. Following the incident, he refrained from bathing for several weeks because the bathroom lacked a lock, and he was afraid his brother might break in while he was vulnerable. This led to him smelling very unpleasantly, which further fueled his anger towards his mother. It is hard to believe that a mother wouldn't notice their child had stopped showering, yet Melanie never mentioned this to Zachary. As a result, Zachary began to harm himself, which was the most severe sign of his illness. He expressed thoughts of wanting to kill his mother with a sledgehammer, wishing for her to die a painful death rather than peacefully in her sleep. He fantasized about starting a fire while Josh was still in the house, so that Josh would wake up in panic as the flames approached him. Wanting him to suffer, however, things didn't unfold as Zachary had envisioned, and Josh survived now. Reflecting on these events, Zachary regrets not having followed through with his plan to ensure his brother was dead before leaving the house. Many believe that Zachary was not mentally fit to stand trial, but he was ultimately deemed competent, and the trial proceeded, although he was only 15 years old at the time of the crime. He was tried as an adult. Zachary's defense team presented several factors that may have influenced his actions. They highlighted the death of his father, the voices he claimed to hear from his father, the violence inflicted by his brother, and the alleged neglect he suffered from their mother, Melanie. These were presented as reasons for Zachary's behavior. However, a few days into the trial, an unexpected development occurred. When called to testify about his mother's murder, Zachary claimed he did not commit the crime. This was surprising, especially since he had previously confessed to the police and discussed the incident for months. He now stated that he had no knowledge of who killed his mother and later accused his brother, Josh, of the murder, saying he tried to cover for him by taking the blame. No one believed this new story, as the evidence clearly pointed to Zachary as the perpetrator. It was evident to everyone that he was responsible for the crime, and it was well known that Josh was not involved in their mother's murder. On Friday, June 5, 2014, when Zachary was 17 years old, Sumner County Judge D. David Gay sentenced Zachary Davis to life in prison, with a minimum term of 60 years in Tennessee and the possibility of parole after 51 years, when he is eligible for parole. Zachary Davis will be about 68 years old. Whether this murder was a brutal murder or the result of a mental disorder, it is a tragic story of a family destroyed. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Samantha and Tessara Crespi. David Crespi comes from a family known for its success and respect. He is from Sacramento, California, and both he and his brother, along with their father, graduated from California State University. David earned an accounting degree with honors in 1983. His older brother, John, is the pride of the family, having become a professor of economics at Kansas State University. With his excellent academic performance, David easily found a job at a local bank, where he quickly rose to the position of CFO. However, the bank eventually closed. He then worked as a manager at a mortgage company in Sacramento. David has 2 children from his first marriage. However, his life took a difficult turn when his first wife died of a brain tumor. David devoted himself to providing for his children during this trying time. Fortunately, he soon met Kim, a woman he had known since college. Their friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship, and they began living together in 1994. Kim married David and adopted his children. In 1997, they welcomed a son, and 4 years later, they had twins, Tessara and Samantha. In total, David has 5 children with 2 women. In 2001, David moved to a new and promising bank, prompting his family to relocate to Matthews, a small town in the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina. By 2006, David Crespi was a vice president at a bank and lived with his family in a comfortable 3-story house in a prosperous area of Matthews. They had lived in this quiet neighborhood for nearly 5 years, which was considered an ideal place to raise children. The family shared a strong, loving bond and maintained a warm relationship with one another. David was regarded as a caring and active family man. They were actively involved in their local church, where David served on the finance committee. To many, it seemed that David had achieved his dream. What appeared to be a happy life actually concealed deeper problems. From a young age, David struggled with mental health issues. On the surface, he seemed to be a kind, devoted, successful, hard-working, and intelligent husband and father. However, he often suffered from severe bouts of depression that would come and go without warning. His condition worsened after the death of his first wife, but it only began to improve when Kim entered his life. She did her best to support him, and they both believed that this would help him overcome his challenges. Unfortunately, it was not enough. David's mental health issues began when he was 20 years old. At that time, he faced typical challenges in love and difficulties in planning for the future, which left him in a state of sadness. Adult life turned out to be more difficult than he had anticipated. Despite this, David still managed to excel in everything he did and worked tirelessly, not realizing that his success came at a high cost. As a young man, David did not seek help and preferred to solve problems on his own. As an adult, his depression often stemmed from the increased demands of his job and the responsibilities he assumed. His family was aware of his difficulties, and his colleagues noticed when he occasionally fell into a state of depression. However, David usually recovered quite quickly. There were no serious consequences for his work life. People understood his situation. He could take a day off, but his colleagues covered for him and provided sick leave when necessary. Their support seemed justified because, while his depression was in remission, David excelled in his field. The situation became increasingly serious. David was a devout Catholic, as was his entire family, according to his faith. End life was considered a sin. Despite this belief, David frequently contemplated end life during his time as vice president and even attempted it several times without success. During this period, David chose to spend time outdoors, searching for a suitable place to end his life instead of working. His wife tried to intervene and save him during these moments. After each attempt, David promised his family that he would not try to commit end life again. David struggled with depression that he could not control. Simply promising himself not to harm himself did not help him dispel his dark thoughts. His frustration grew. Instead of feeling like harming himself, he began to have thoughts about harming others. One time, when David and Kim were stopped at a traffic light, he seriously considered driving into a crowd. His wife thought he was joking. Unaware of how sincere his feelings were at this time, David tried several prescription medications, but they were ineffective. His attempts to deal with his mental health issues on his own made him paranoid and withdrawn. He became increasingly anxious about losing his job and going bankrupt. Often imagining the worst-case scenarios, Kim encouraged him to see a psychiatrist, who prescribed him antidepressants. David agreed and committed to the treatment regimen the doctor gave him. David had been on one medication for years, but it caused him to gain weight, which frustrated him. Annoyed by this side effect, he decided to stop taking the medication and try something else. He returned to the psychiatrist, hoping to adjust his treatment regimen for better results. By 2006, he was very familiar with his mental health problems, which had become more frequent and intense during these times. He was haunted by thoughts of harming others. David often thought about ending his life voluntarily, but because of his promise not to harm himself, he considered harming others instead. Although he saw his doctor regularly, he never revealed these feelings. Hoping that a prescription medication would help him manage his difficulties, he feared losing everything he had built. He understood that if his doctor knew about his obsessive thoughts, it could lead to serious consequences, such as hospitalization, loss of his job, or separation from his wife and children. He tried not to think about harming others and fought against these thoughts. David's last appointment with a psychiatrist was on January 19, 2006. Shortly before the tragic events occurred, the psychiatrist prescribed new medication, believing that David was struggling with sleep problems and anxiety. He had also recently changed his previous medication, which could cause weight gain. The psychiatrist did not notice anything unusual. David was very good at hiding his emotions and preferred to rely on himself. On the morning of January 20, 2006, David's family was at home. Kim, David, and their 5-year-old twins, Samantha and Tessera, whom David adored, were all together. David was on sick leave due to his battle with depression. At that time, everything seemed normal, and there was no sign that anything was wrong. At 11:30 a.m., David received a call from his mother. It was a routine check-in. She was aware of his mental health issues and called at the same time every day to see how he was doing, and if he needed any support. They talked for about 15 minutes, during which David reassured her that everything was fine. His 3 older children were at school at the time at 12:15 p.m., while Samantha and Tessera were having lunch. Kim was looking after them. She felt confident that nothing would happen to the children because David loved them very much. She believed that they would be safe with him. Kim had gone out to get a haircut after lunch. David worked on the computer, but then took a break to spend time with his daughters. He suggested they play hide and seek, and they scattered to find hiding places around the house. David went into the kitchen and laid out some knives on the table. He then began to search for the twins. He saw Samantha first. She was smiling and unaware of the dark thoughts in his mind, deciding to end the game. He quietly took her to the kitchen. Suddenly, he picked her up and placed her on the kitchen table. He took a knife and began to attack Samantha. The little girl screamed and struggled, and then she stopped breathing, hearing strange noises. Tessera came out of hiding and saw her father attacking Samantha, even though she was only 5 years old. She sensed that something terrible was happening, fearing for her own safety. She hid on the second floor of the house. Unfortunately, Tessera was easily discovered in the bathroom of the master bedroom. The little girl begged David not to hurt her, but David ignored her cries. He pinned her to the floor and began to attack her with a knife. Tessera cried, screamed, and fought fiercely against her father, but all in vain. Once a loving father, he had now left his 2 young daughters lifeless. David then considered end life, but ultimately decided against it. Instead of running away, he showered, changed clothes, and called 911. During the call, he calmly confessed that he had killed his 2 daughters and attempted CPR. Although he believed it was useless, as they were already dead, he answered the police's questions clearly, providing his details, his phone number, and his wife's location. He appeared calm rather than distressed and requested emergency assistance, expressing his desire to end his life. After the call ended, the police quickly arrived at David's home. David's home is located on Creek Road in an affluent area, where his family lives in a villa. It was surprising that such a tragic event could happen in a place known for its prosperity. When the police arrived, David was found sitting outside the house, waiting for them and for his wife Kim, who was still at the beauty salon. He surrendered and accompanied the police back to the house. Kim later returned home and learned of the situation. Initially, Kim feared that her husband had committed end life, but when she learned the truth, she was shocked. The police placed David under 24-hour surveillance and provided him with specialized clothing designed to prevent self-harm, removing any dangerous objects from his immediate vicinity. The case attracted considerable public attention, as a prominent and wealthy man faced the possibility of the death penalty, which is legal in North Carolina. It is reported that David may reach a plea deal with the prosecution if he admits to 2 counts of first-degree murder. The prosecutor's office will agree not to pursue the death penalty as a result. David could face life in prison without parole. Many feel that this sentence is too lenient for the deaths of Samantha and Tessara, 2 innocent girls. During questioning, David mentioned that he had been dealing with depression and suggested that his actions were influenced by a new medication prescribed by his doctor. David has spoken openly about his illness, seemingly trying to shift the prosecutor's focus to his condition, which he believes caused the tragic events. He stated that he had struggled with depression for years and had finally reached a point where he could no longer bear it. Over the past few months, his condition had worsened significantly. He revealed that he had intended to harm strangers with his car, but also admitted that he had darker thoughts about his wife and 5 children while they slept. Amid his financial struggles, he was overwhelmed by the fear of losing his job as a bank vice president. He felt disillusioned by his inability to provide for his wife and children, which left him feeling unstable. On that day, he heard voices in his head telling him that there was no future, that everything was ruined, and that he had to kill his daughters. David believed that the twins were also suffering from depression, which was why they were not attending kindergarten. He eventually came to the disturbing conclusion that killing Samantha and Tessara might ease his own pain and prevent his mental health from deteriorating further. Kim shocked many by forgiving and supporting David. Despite his violent actions, she felt the death penalty was too harsh and believed it would not bring her children back to life. Despite her heartache over the tragedy, Kim has repeatedly told the media that executing David would only cause further harm to the family. She expressed relief that her husband did not commit life before the police arrived. Kim believes that his actions stemmed from mental health issues that he could not control, including severe depression and psychosis. She remains hopeful that he will eventually recover and return to the loving and calm person he once was. The Supreme Court is reviewing the death penalty. Some believe that David deserves the death penalty for killing his 2 children. However, the prosecutor was reluctant to pursue this option because it would be difficult to convince all 12 jurors. As a result, the inquest continues to investigate more disturbing evidence beyond David's confession. David's attorneys have prepared a strong argument against the death penalty, emphasizing his long history of severe mental illness, which has spanned more than 2 decades. Prior to this tragic event, David had no criminal record. He was a devoted family man and a respectable citizen. There was no history of aggressive behavior in his past, and he had never harmed his wife or children. As Kim and other family members confirmed, the defense argued that on January 20, David's mental illness led to the tragic deaths of his 2 children. The attorneys, along with all of David's relatives, believed that he was experiencing a psychotic episode at the time of the incident. Kim stated that he had been working hard for years to control his mental health issues and had been successful. They had consulted with professionals, and he had been prescribed medication. However, Kim felt that the treatment he received was not effective enough. Over the years, the family continued to seek help and adhered to the treatment plan, ensuring that he took his medication as prescribed. A psychological evaluation revealed that David had more serious mental health problems than initially thought, rather than just depression and anxiety. He was diagnosed with psychosis. It became clear that the medications prescribed were not appropriate for his condition. Several years before the incident, David had been diagnosed with genital cancer and had been successfully treated. On the day of the tragedy, he was scheduled for a follow-up appointment. His attorneys presented medical documents showing that he had been prescribed several medications, one for depression, another for anxiety, and a third to help him sleep while on the antidepressants. David gained more than 20 kg and had difficulty breathing, which forced him to stop taking the medication. His doctor then prescribed another medication in January, but it did not resolve his sleep problems. He finally returned to the doctor. Just one day before the murder, medical records show that David's treating physician removed his sedative and sleeping pills and prescribed a different sleeping pill instead. After this change, David began to notice alterations in his mental state, impairing his ability to think clearly. The day before the twins were murdered, he became delirious and acted erratically. Experiencing extreme mood swings, this exacerbated his anxiety about not being able to provide for his family. However, management at the bank where he worked described David as having an excellent work record, with no indication that he was in danger of losing his job. Despite this reassurance, David's mental state left him vulnerable to irrational fears. He worried that he might not receive a bonus from the bank, recalling that he had earned $45 the year before, but doubting that he would receive the same amount again. However, he later discovered that the bank had approved a large bonus during this difficult time. David was not in a clear state of mind and could not think rationally while awaiting the hearing in the case of Samantha and Tessara's murder. Kim visited her husband frequently. She repeatedly expressed her deep faith and love for him, believing that one day they would overcome the challenges caused by his illness and avoid such terrible tragedies. Kim only knew David as a kind and loving person. She believed that inadequate treatment led to the deaths of their children and the pain the family endured afterward. The scene of the crime was tragic. It is hard to imagine the pain Kim felt when she returned from the beauty salon to find the police and paramedics carrying her daughter's bodies. In fact, David's troubled thoughts began long before these tragic events. At the time, David was being treated with prescription medications. The initial treatment regimen helped control his negative thoughts to some extent, but things changed when adjustments were made. Experts later concluded that the new drugs had caused acute psychosis, according to David's own confession. When Samantha and Tessara were only 1 year old, he had thoughts of harming them. One day, while walking with the girls in the backyard, he hid a weapon in his pocket. Fortunately, he regained his composure and realized that he needed to stop. He convinced himself that he could overcome his challenges and that his family's financial situation would improve. David later returned to the doctor, but avoided discussing his thoughts of harming his children. Instead, he vaguely mentioned having bad thoughts about harming others and expressed his fear of losing his children and family by withholding information. He likely misled his doctors. As a result, he was prescribed medications that he had taken previously, which led to weight gain. In his confession, David admitted that, for many years, he had often felt like harming a family member, but he had been able to control these impulses until now. He believed that he had everything under control and could never actually act on the harmful thoughts. David recounted that after his wife got a haircut one morning, he was working on his computer when the obsessive thought returned. It urged him to kill his children. He thought that if he did so, all his worries would disappear because he would have no one to care for. David realized that his mental problems were related to his actions. During his initial interrogations, David responded coldly. When asked why he killed both girls instead of just one, he explained that because they were twins, they needed to die together. However, the situation changed when David received comprehensive treatment. It was only then that he understood the severity of his crime. He admitted that he had never shared his thoughts about killing his children. His wife, Kim, did not fully understand the gravity of her husband's condition. David's doctor was not held responsible after the tragedy. Citing David's failure to provide accurate information, the doctor was unaware of many of David's hidden struggles, which prevented him from fully assessing the situation. Furthermore, all medications have side effects that can vary from person to person, and doctors cannot predict such severe reactions. David received support and treatment while in prison, which had a positive impact on him during his preliminary hearing. He began to understand the extent of his responsibility for his actions and fully admitted his guilt. Psychiatrists confirmed that he was fit to stand trial. David's family was shocked by what had happened. His father had seen him just a week before the tragic event. He appeared healthy and showed no signs of impending disaster. On July 30, 2006, the hearings took place. Ultimately, David Crespi reached a plea deal and pleaded guilty, while the prosecutor's office chose not to pursue the death penalty. This decision caused considerable controversy, dividing public opinion. With one group calling for the death penalty, the trial was brief, and the jury sentenced David Crespi to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The trial was short but filled with deep emotion. David's family cried, and he struggled to hold back tears as he came to terms with the pain his actions had caused. He felt he would be haunted by guilt for the rest of his life. Even the police officers who had arrived at the scene that day were in tears. A young officer went upstairs and discovered Tessera's body. He checked for a pulse, hoping she was still alive. The police carried the injured child down the stairs, praying that she would survive. However, when the doctors examined the body, it was clear that she had died from her injuries, what the police felt as a pulse may have been his own heartbeat. This story raises many questions. Was David truly unaware of what was happening at the time? Were his actions influenced by a psychotic episode? He appeared normal when he talked to his mother and wife and went to work. However, his actions were completely different. When his wife, Kim, left the house, everything seemed normal. But he caused a massacre right afterward. He considered end life, but decided against it and tried to calm down. So why didn't he try to control himself in the moment when he killed the child? Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Shannon Medill. Shannon Medill was born in 1989 in Alberta, Canada. She spent years honing her acting skills. Her journey was challenging, but she was ready to start a new chapter in her life. On November 26, 2014, Shannon auditioned and was selected. But before she could celebrate her achievement, she disappeared without a trace. After a day passed without Shannon returning home, her family's worries grew as no one could reach her. Shannon's family was confused. Not knowing what could have happened, they called her cell phone, sent messages on all social media platforms, and left emails. But Shannon did not respond. Her behavior was unusual and completely out of character. Shannon's family contacted the police, but they stressed that Shannon was an adult who had the right to come and go without informing anyone. However, Shannon's family insisted that this behavior was out of character for her and that a search had to be launched. Fearing that something terrible might have happened, Shannon was the youngest of 4 children. From a young age, she loved being the center of attention and was very creative. She loved to sing and began performing in small shows in kindergarten, showcasing her acting talent during her school years. Ultimately, did not complete her studies. Choosing instead to focus on her acting skills, Shannon spent her days attending auditions and interviews, but she was constantly rejected. However, during this time, she found an opportunity in comedy and began performing stand-up, which helped her become famous in 2010. When Shannon turned 21, she attended a party with friends to relax there. She met Joshua Burgess. He was quite different from Shannon, but they quickly connected, and these differences eventually helped balance each other out. The couple enjoyed spending time together, watching TV and playing video games. They shared many interests, which strengthened their relationship. After 4 years of dating, the couple decided to get married. In May 2014, Shannon began planning her wedding. With Joshua's active support, their wedding, attended by only their closest family members, was a joyous event. However, the couple did not seem completely happy. Over the next month, Shannon focused on her acting career, attending more auditions, some of which took place in Edmonton, a city 3 hours north of Calgary. where she lived with her husband. This meant she spent a lot of time traveling between the two places. Shannon has appeared in numerous television shows, voiced audiobooks, and even acted in plays. She has often expressed her belief that great success awaits her in Edmonton. On November 26, 2014, 25-year-old Shannon and her brother Brett had planned to meet at the Calgary Theatre. Prior to their meeting, Shannon had auditioned for a show and she was accepted. Marking a major milestone in her journey to pursue her dreams, Brett was waiting for Shannon at the theater, and he understood how important the event was to her. As the minutes ticked by, his anxiety grew. He couldn't reach her. Shannon ignored his messages. Eventually, he had no choice but to leave. He tried calling her the next morning, but she still didn't answer. Brett contacted their parents, but they were also confused about the situation. His mother suggested that Shannon's work schedule might have changed. She mentioned that sometimes, when Shannon worked the night shift, she would sleep during the day. However, this explanation didn't seem plausible. Shannon usually paid attention to her phone calls because it was important for her to stay in touch and not miss anything significant. To reassure herself, their mother thought that when Shannon woke up in the evening, she would realize she had missed the calls and would eventually call back. A voicemail message was left for Shannon, and her family assured her that they were not angry with her. They just wanted her to let them know she was safe. Unfortunately, she did not respond, worried that something was wrong. Her relatives, including her husband Joshua, went to the police for help. They reported her missing and speculated that she might have been in an accident while traveling to or from Edmonton. Initially, the police were slow to act on their request, but after some persuasion, they began to get involved. Eventually, the police launched a search operation. Hospitals were checked, but no accidents were reported that day. The following days were a blur. Family members anxiously awaited any news. During this time, Shannon did not shop, did not use any credit cards, and there were no activity records on her car. As if she had disappeared, she also stopped using her social media accounts, where she often shared updates about her acting career. Unexpectedly, a few days later, Joshua reported to the police that he had found Shannon's cell phone in her pants pocket at home. He also discovered her car, but the police did not find anything suspicious. Nearly 2 weeks passed without any news until the police found some unusual photos. 2 photos of a girl with her hair covering her face were found attached to a tree in a Calgary park, although the identity could not be confirmed. The girl bore a strong resemblance to Shannon, especially due to her bright red hair. It appeared that a potential kidnapper was taunting the police. Search efforts were organized in Big Sugar Creek, one of Canada's largest parks. Several teams were formed, including volunteers and Shannon's family members. For 2 days, police scoured a large area, assisted by specially trained dogs and a rescue helicopter that surveyed the park from the air. Unfortunately, these efforts were unsuccessful. It was later discovered that the images that prompted the search were part of an art project created by local university students. Realizing that their photos had been mistakenly taken as evidence in connection with the case, the students contacted the police to clarify the situation. During this time, her family anxiously awaited news, but there were no clues regarding Shannon's whereabouts. It was unclear whether she would ever be found alive. The idea of a kidnapping seemed unlikely, as no ransom was demanded, nor had the family been contacted. Joshua revealed a previously unknown fact to the police. He explained that his wife had been struggling with her acting career for years. One evening, she called him and confessed that she had considered jumping off a bridge during a particularly difficult time. She had just suffered another disappointment after auditioning for a role in a television series she had hoped to land. Fortunately, she was able to overcome the emotional pain, but she later suffered a nervous breakdown. The police were concerned that such a traumatic experience might have led her to consider end life. Police and divers searched rivers in the area, hoping to find any sign of her. Unfortunately, despite exhaustive searches along the riverbank for miles, they found no clues, and the investigation hit a dead end. By May 2015, Nearly 6 months after Shannon disappeared, the police still had no clue as to her whereabouts. During this time, an experienced police officer named Christine took over the investigation, having worked in the homicide division for many years. She was known for her determination and attention to detail. Her previous efforts had led to the arrest of many dangerous criminals, and she was committed to solving this case. Christine decided to investigate those close to Shannon. She wanted to learn more about her husband, Joshua, from the beginning. He seemed like a kind and positive person. He cooperated fully with the police, allowing them to search his home twice and readily answering their questions. He also supported Shannon's family when they went to the police station to report her disappearance. Even after she went missing, the family kept in touch with Joshua, comforting each other and holding out hope. When asked about the possibility that Joshua was involved in Shannon's disappearance, all of her relatives responded that he could never hurt his wife. However, during discussions with Shannon's family about her husband, Joshua, the police made a surprising discovery. The couple had been married for over 7 months at the time of the tragic events, but it was only now, 6 months after Shannon's disappearance, that it was revealed that they had an open marriage. This meant that they were in an unconventional relationship where both Joshua and Shannon could have other partners. Joshua claimed that he proposed this arrangement and that Shannon agreed. Although she did not seem particularly interested in it, Shannon's family was also aware of the arrangement. This arrangement allowed Joshua and Shannon to explore their private lives more freely, especially when Joshua was dating other women. According to Joshua, they had no disputes about their open marriage. Surprisingly, Shannon knew about all of her husband's affairs and had even met some of his girlfriends. Officer Christine discovered that Joshua had had about 7 affairs during their marriage. It was important to interview all of his girlfriends. The police were then able to locate and question them without any difficulty. According to the investigation, Joshua's last girlfriend shared some intriguing details. She continued to see him even after Shannon went missing. This girlfriend revealed information that the police had never heard before. They discovered that just before Shannon went missing, there had been a serious conflict between her and Joshua concerning the openness of their relationship. When Shannon decided to end their open marriage, Joshua's girlfriend stated that to avoid further conflict, he agreed with Shannon's decision. However, a week later, Shannon discovered that Joshua was still in contact with his girlfriend. Despite his promise to end the relationship, she found out because he had locked his phone, which was unusual, as they had previously been free to check each other's devices. When Joshua gave her the password, Shannon discovered that instead of breaking up with his mistress, he had decided to marry her, making Shannon the second person in his life. Joshua claims he is planning to file for divorce soon. Shannon felt deeply betrayed after throwing away Joshua's phone. She carefully considered her situation and made some important decisions, including moving from Calgary to Edmonton. She was in the process of implementing this plan at the time of her disappearance. During this period, she continued to live with Joshua, but they arranged their schedules to avoid seeing each other. Their relationship was extremely strained. Shannon often worked night shifts, while Joshua had a completely different schedule, causing them to barely see one another. According to the investigation, Shannon's life ended on November 27, 2014. After that day, all her banking transactions stopped. She ceased using the internet, and her phone went silent at noon. However, a signal from her phone was detected in an alley in the city the next morning. Joshua later claimed that he had found the phone at home. Interestingly, a few days later, Joshua also discovered Shannon's car, but could not explain how he found it. All of this seemed very suspicious to Officer Christine. Christine decided to speak to Joshua again. Meanwhile, an application to confiscate Joshua's phone had been filed, as he was increasingly considered a prime suspect in Shannon's case. In addition, the police decided to confiscate the car. On June 2, 2015, 7 months after Shannon's disappearance, Police Christine, along with other police, went to Joshua's house. They brought a search warrant to confiscate his cell phone and car. The the officers knocked on the door and asked to enter the house. But initially, Joshua did not answer. After a while, he responded to the police and announced that he would be coming out soon. It appeared that Joshua was moving around inside, possibly trying to buy time to hide something. He answered the second police call, but explained the delay by saying that he was looking for his pants. Joshua spoke from behind a closed door and was asked to come out. Regardless of his appearance, the police sensed that something important was happening inside. They were prepared for any eventuality, including the use of weapons. Suddenly, he burst into tears and confessed to killing Shannon. After some persuasion, he finally opened the door. The police entered and saw Joshua bleeding. On the floor next to him was a military knife, which he had used to commit end life. He was rushed to the hospital. Joshua had lost a significant amount of blood, but he was not in critical condition and did not require surgery. The doctors were able to stitch up his wound. A psychiatric evaluation was needed to determine whether he was a danger to himself or others. When Joshua was taken into the interrogation room, he only said that he would confess his love to Shannon if he could see her alive, and he did not say anything else. Meanwhile, the police searched Joshua's home with the help of sniffer dogs. Later, they discovered a body buried in the yard, and during the excavation, they found enough evidence to secure a conviction. However, they still wanted to obtain a confession and hear Joshua's account of the events. On the second day after his arrest, Joshua provided a detailed account of the events on the day Shannon went missing. He returned home and found her sitting on the couch. She appeared very upset and immediately accused him of cheating, calling him a traitor for the affair. In a fit of rage, she lost control and said many harsh words to him. Unable to bear her accusations, Joshua tried to cover her mouth with his hand. In response, Shannon bit him and continued to insult him, expressing her disgust at his attempts to touch her. In a fit of rage, Joshua grabbed Shannon by the neck and began to strangle her until she stopped breathing. When he realized she was dead, he became frightened and was unable to call an ambulance because she was dead. When Joshua recounted this, he became emotional, cried, and clearly felt remorse for his actions. Finally, the confession brought him relief after 8 long months of carrying this secret. During this time, Shannon's body lay in their home. Despite being checked twice by the police, they ignored the containers on the back porch, which were hidden under trash bags to avoid detection. Joshua Burgess was charged with second-degree murder. Shannon's family eventually learned the truth about what had happened, shocking everyone to discover that the killer had been near them the entire time. Even helping to find Shannon, Joshua's trial attracted considerable public and media attention. Despite his remorse, Joshua did not want to make his confession public and refused to attend the trial. Shannon's family believed that he was a coward who did not dare to face Shannon's loved ones. The prosecutor's office and the family contended that it was a premeditated murder and that he was still trying to hide the evidence. He acted as if nothing had happened, hoping to escape prosecution and punishment. At the last minute, the jury found Joshua Burgess guilty of second-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison. With the possibility of parole after 10 years, the family of the Shannon was unhappy with this sentence. They believed that it was Joshua's lifestyle that led to the end of Shannon's life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Charlotte Mulhall. In March 2005, a gruesome murder occurred in Ireland when a fisherman made a disturbing discovery in a canal. He initially thought he had found a mannequin, but upon closer inspection, he realized it was part of a human leg wearing a sock. He immediately contacted the police. The subsequent investigation revealed many details about this infamous case. The Mulhall family lived in South Dublin, Ireland, consisting of parents John and Kathleen and their 6 children, 3 daughters and 3 sons. The family faced challenges related to alcohol and substance abuse. Both parents drank regularly, and their arguments often became loud and violent, all in front of the children. Despite their troubled marriage, John and Kathleen remained together for 27 years. However, by the early 2000s, when their children were grown, they decided to divorce due to financial issues, but continued to live together. At first, it seemed that family life was getting better. However, in 2002, Kathleen introduced her new boyfriend, Farah Swala Noor, who was 14 years her junior. Kathleen's ex-husband, John, felt uncomfortable having a stranger in his home, especially since Farah was now sharing a bed with Kathleen. In response, John decided to leave and move in with his girlfriend. Unfortunately, his new partner soon kicked him out of the house, and he spent a year wandering around Dublin before returning home. Luckily for John, by that time, Kathleen and Farah had moved into a rented flat in another area of Dublin. Farah arrived in Ireland in December 1996 under the false name Shalila Salim. He claimed to be from Somalia and said that his entire family had died in the Civil War. In fact, he was from Kenya and his family still lived there. Farah had a record of minor crimes, and when his deception was discovered, he faced deportation. He successfully appealed the decision in March 1999. He married a Dublin resident, and they had a child together, which enabled him to obtain Irish citizenship after naturalization. Farah left his wife and began living a chaotic life, relying on odd jobs and petty theft to make ends meet. Farah had a violent past, including an incident in which he abused a mentally disabled Chinese woman, although she bore him a son. Farah escaped punishment for his actions. Reports suggest he harbored a deep hatred for women. In 2002, Farah met Kathleen, and they began a tumultuous relationship. Both were unemployed and relied on odd jobs to make ends meet. Their shared love of alcohol initially bonded them, but over time, their difficult personalities led to frequent arguments, which Kathleen's children often witnessed. Kathleen's eldest daughter, Linda, was born in 1975. She dropped out of school at a young age. By the age of 24, she had 4 children and often forgot the names of her boyfriends due to a series of short-lived relationships. Linda also served a short prison sentence for theft and struggled with alcohol and drug addiction. Linda's younger sister, Charlotte, had her own legal troubles, with around 7 convictions for theft, property damage, escort services, and other misdemeanors. Like Linda, Charlotte also struggled with serious addiction issues. The other siblings also had their own legal problems, and none were considered positive role models. On Sunday, March 20, 2005, Linda invited Charlotte to her apartment. While they were talking in the kitchen, Charlotte suggested that they start celebrating her birthday, which was the next day. At first, Linda refused because she had been abstaining from alcohol for 3 weeks to regain custody of her children, who were in a shelter. However, the temptation to drink became too strong, and half an hour later, they opened a bottle of hard liquor to start the birthday celebration. A few hours later, the sisters decided to visit their mother and her partner, Farah. When they called their mother, they found out that Kathleen and Farah were at a bar in central Dublin. Without hesitation, the sisters joined them. It turned out that Kathleen and Farah had been celebrating St. Patrick's Day for 4 consecutive days. After meeting Linda and Charlotte at the bar, the family did not stay long and decided to continue celebrating at a nearby park. However, Farah got into an argument with some locals, forcing the family to stay out of trouble and decide to go home. The 4 of them returned to Kathleen and Farah's rented apartment. They prepared food and set the table to celebrate Charlotte's upcoming birthday. When everything was ready, Farah fell asleep. To lift Farah's spirits, Kathleen slipped a pill into his drink. Although the ecstasy worked, things did not go as they had expected. A moment later, Linda, who was sitting on the sofa, suddenly felt Farah caress and squeeze her legs. Then he put his arm around her waist and whispered inappropriate words into her ear. At first, Linda did not want to cause a scandal, so she reminded Farah to behave. After witnessing Farah's inappropriate actions, Linda openly asked him to take his hands off her. Realizing that the situation was escalating. Kathleen and Charlotte began to insult Farah and asked him to behave properly. The argument quickly turned into a fight. Then, Farah grabbed Kathleen, causing her to scream for help to her daughters. In response, Charlotte pulled a knife from her pocket and attacked Farah, seeing her sister Charlotte in danger. Linda rushed to the pantry and grabbed a large iron hammer under the influence of alcohol. Linda lost control of her actions. Soon, the floors, walls, and rooms were in chaos. Meanwhile, the girl's mother, Kathleen, sat in a chair, holding a glass and watching her two daughters attack Farah. Eventually, she grew tired of the commotion and turned her attention to the television, where an entertainment program was playing. After the altercation, the sisters began to understand what had happened, and panic set in. Kathleen stepped in to help and gave Linda and Charlotte a plan for how to dispose of Farah's body. Kathleen said that no one would charge them with murder if Farah's body was not found. So Linda and Charlotte spent the next 5 hours in the bathroom processing the body. During this time, Kathleen took a nap. When Kathleen woke up, she found 7 black plastic bags in the hallway. She called her ex-husband John to tell him about the nightmare that had unfolded in their rented apartment. John was skeptical and did not believe her at first. However, when he arrived and saw the scene from the front door, he realized it was no joke. He declared that he would not participate and went home. After a short break, Kathleen and her 2 daughters began a thorough cleaning of the apartment. They used brooms and several gallons of bleach to meticulously wipe down every surface. At noon on March 21, Kathleen, Linda, and Charlotte left the rented apartment, each carrying a sports bag containing black trash bags. They walked to the nearest river channel and, unnoticed, threw 6 black bags into the water. The women then went to a restaurant. Afterward, they took a bus for about an hour to the city center. Once there, they stopped at a large store, browsed several areas, withdrew money from an ATM, and went to a park. In the park, they dug a shallow hole with a knife and buried the last bag. They eventually threw the knife and hammer into a nearby pond before returning home. Over the next few days, Kathleen and her daughters focused on cleaning the rental apartment. Kathleen bought a large amount of cleaning supplies. She later admitted that there was a terrible, nauseating smell in the room that no cleaning product could remove. Kathleen and Charlotte coped with the smell by drinking and using drugs to forget it. However, Linda was very distressed, crying constantly and unable to calm down. 10 days later, one of the bags that Kathleen and her daughters had thrown into the Dublin Canal floated to the surface. A local fisherman discovered it and quickly called the police to report the incident. When the police arrived, they drained the canal, and divers searched the area, eventually finding 6 black bags containing the man's body. A forensic expert determined that the man had suffered 28 injuries due to the brutal nature of the case. The police initially speculated that he may have died during a witchcraft ritual, but later ruled this theory out after consulting with experts. The police knew they needed to solve the case by identifying the victim. However, the DNA database did not have any matches for the body. Therefore, officers decided to take a different approach. They shared descriptions and photos of the items found in the victim's bag through social media. Among these items was a torn T-shirt with the logo of an Irish football club. This shirt helped identify the victim as Farah Swaleh Noor, as one of his old friends from Somalia recognized it. This friend also mentioned that Farah had been missing for several weeks and had stopped answering calls. Police discovered that Farah had been living with a girlfriend named Kathleen Mulhall for the past few years. This information prompted further investigation. Samalit received a cash reward for helping to locate Kathleen, while 2 others, Linda and Charlotte, were brought in for questioning. All 3 denied any involvement, and the police had no evidence to charge the women. So they were released the same day. In July 2005, one of Kathleen's sons, who was serving time in prison for a traffic violation, informed a guard that his mother and sisters had killed Farah. He claimed that during a prison visit, Kathleen had confessed to the crime to him. Following this revelation, the police searched Kathleen's apartment and discovered traces of Farah's blood. In August 2005, Kathleen, Linda, and Charlotte were again questioned at the police station. They maintained their innocence, and the interrogation lasted 12 hours. Kathleen and her two daughters, Linda and Charlotte, were then released. During this time, Linda, who was extremely remorseful, called the police at the end of August and confessed to the crime, leading them to the park where they had buried a black bag that eventually contained Farah's body. However, it is believed that the black bag was unearthed and moved to another location shortly after Linda's confession. In September 2005, Kathleen Mulhall fled to England. In December 2005, Linda and Charlotte were arrested and charged with murder. Shortly afterward, their biological father, John, who was looking after the 4 children on his own, died. It is believed that he had nothing to do with the crime. Linda and Charlotte's trial began in October 2006, with Linda facing a charge of manslaughter and Charlotte charged with attempted murder. During the trial, both women claimed they acted in self-defense, maintained their innocence, and stated that they were trying to protect their mother. After a brief deliberation, the jury found Charlotte Mulhall and Linda Mulhall guilty. The judge sentenced Linda to 15 years in prison, while Charlotte received a life sentence. It was reported that both sisters had exhibited poor behavior while incarcerated in a women's prison in Dublin. One day, Linda injured her hand and spent several weeks in the hospital. Charlotte attracted media attention after a photograph was released of Charlotte attacking a male prisoner. The incident led to increased security measures at all prisons in Ireland, and Charlotte was subsequently transferred to a higher security facility in Limerick. Kathleen Mulhall's story began when she fled Ireland in September 2005 and assumed a new identity in the UK. However, in January 2008, a reporter discovered her location and reported her to the police. As a result, Kathleen was forced to return to Ireland, where she faced numerous charges. She confessed to helping her daughters dispose of their bodies and clean their apartment. In May 2009, Kathleen was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but was released after serving only 2 years. After her release in October 2011, she returned to the UK and moved in with her son, James. At that time, James's family consisted of his 6 children and the 4 children of his sister, Linda. He adopted Linda's children after she was arrested. After Kathleen arrived, tensions rose between James and his live-in girlfriend, eventually leading to an incident in which he assaulted her and was subsequently imprisoned. Kathleen later suffered severe kidney failure and underwent an organ transplant in Dublin. She now lives in her hometown, where she continues to receive treatment. Linda was released early from her sentence that same year. She now lives with her children and her new partner. Linda does not give interviews to journalists. In a recent statement to the media, she said, "She have served my sentence. Let she live in peace after all. This is she personal life, and it is none of your." Since March 2023, Charlotte has been allowed to leave prison for 1 day. Under close supervision by guards, she may soon be eligible for parole. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of John Allen Chow. We'll embark on a journey to the enigmatic North Sentinel Island in the Andaman Islands, India, to explore the lives of the Sentinelese. The island's inhabitants, they live in complete isolation from the modern world, maintaining a hunter-gatherer lifestyle that dates back tens of thousands of years. Known for their hostility towards outsiders, their language, beliefs, and social structure remain largely unknown, making them a symbol of prehistoric isolation. Tourism has been rapidly developing on the Andaman Islands, attracting visitors from around the world to experience its breathtaking natural beauty. Travelers come to admire the majestic mangrove forests, stroll through lush, tropical jungles, relax on pristine sandy beaches, and savor fresh local cuisine. However, let's turn our focus to North Sentinel Island. This isolated island spans nearly 60 square kilometers and has a roughly circular, shield-like shape. It typically enjoys bright sunshine, but also experiences seasonal winds and monsoons. Satellite images reveal that the island is surrounded by coral reefs and sandy beaches. Almost the entire island, apart from the coastline, is covered by dense tropical forest. Despite thousands of satellite images being taken, the thick forest canopy conceals anything beneath it. Adding to the island's enduring mystery, it is important to note that visiting North Sentinel Island has been strictly prohibited since 1956 under the Protection of Aboriginal Tribes Act for the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. It is illegal to approach the island. A restricted zone of 8 kilometers has been established around it. The Indian Coast Guard regularly patrols the surrounding waters, and anyone attempting to enter the island faces severe penalties, including heavy fines and imprisonment. Additionally, visiting many nearby islands also requires official permits. The Sentinelese remain isolated, fiercely defending their territory despite efforts to make contact. Nearly all attempts have failed. If someone were stranded on the island, Indian authorities would not intervene. Their population is estimated between 80 to 150 individuals. As no official count has been made, they rely on a diet of wild boar, fish, shellfish, and plants, avoiding contact with the outside world and fishing only within their lagoon. They remain within their reefs, fishing only in their lagoons while they use canoes. These are limited to shallow waters, where they propel themselves forward with long poles that reach the seabed. So, the Sentinelese are believed to be unable to move in deep waters, as they have not developed the use of oars. Physically, they are distinctive, broad, muscular, and relatively short. With an average height of about 1.6 meters, none of them are obese. Interestingly, the Sentinelese place high value on metal. During their rare interactions with the outside world, they have been seen using arrows with metal tips. In 1974, they took aluminum cookware left behind by the National Geographic Society. The first recorded observation of the Sentinelese occurred in 1771, when Indian sailors passing by noticed a fire on the island's shore. Almost a century later, in 1867, an Indian merchant ship ran aground on one of the island's reefs. The crew reached the shore in search of food and water, but after 3 days, they were attacked by a group of islanders. At the time, no one knew anything about the Sentinelese. In the end, the crew was rescued by a naval team in their rush to escape. The sailors abandoned the damaged vessel and fled to safety. In January 1880, British naval officer Maurice Vidal Portman led an expedition to North Sentinel Island to establish contact with the indigenous people. However, when his team arrived, they could not find any Sentinelese, as the inhabitants had seemingly hidden out of fear. The team followed trails that led to an abandoned village, but no one was there. After several days of fruitless searching, they finding abandoned villages and roads, his team captured 6 people, including an elderly man, a woman, and 4 children. The man and woman died of disease shortly after their arrival in Port Blair, and the children also began to fall ill. Portman hastily sent the children back to North Sentinel Island with a large supply of gifts in an attempt to establish friendly relations. Portman visited the island again in 1883, 1885, and 1887, but all were unsuccessful. In 1896, a prisoner escaped from the Great Andaman Island detention camp on a makeshift raft and drifted to North Sentinel Beach. His body was discovered by a search party a few days later with multiple arrow wounds and a cut throat. On August 2, 1981, the MV Primrose, carrying a large cargo of chicken feed from Bangladesh to Australia, ran aground in rough seas near North Sentinel Island, trapping its small crew. After several days, the captain sent a distress signal, reporting that more than 50 armed islanders were preparing boats to approach the ship. However, heavy waves prevented the islanders from reaching the vessel, and their arrows were deflected. The 31-member crew had to stay vigilant, armed with axes, pipes, and flare weapons. Nearly a week later, the crew was evacuated by a civilian helicopter chartered by the Oil and Natural Gas Corporation with the assistance of the Indian Navy. After the evacuation, the Sentinelese scavenged the abandoned shipwrecks for iron to use in making weapons. Muhammad, a scrap metal dealer contracted by the government to dismantle the Primrose, recorded friendly exchanges of fruit and small pieces of metal with the Sentinelese, who often approached the wreck at low tide. 2 days later, in the early morning, 3 Sentinelese canoes, carrying about a dozen men, approached the Primrose. Initially apprehensive, the crew threw bananas to the islanders in an attempt to attract them and reduce the possibility of conflict over the next 18 months. The Sentinelese regularly visited the crew while they continued salvage work on the abandoned ship. In 1991, the first instances of peaceful contact with the Sentinelese were recorded during 2 regular expeditions conducted by an Indian anthropological team, which included representatives from various government agencies, as well as anthropologist Madhumala Chattopadhyay. This marked the first time a woman on an expedition made contact with the Sentinelese. During the visit on January 4, 1991, the Sentinelese initially approached the team unarmed. They accepted the coconuts offered to them, but retreated when the team signaled for them to come closer. The team returned to the main ship, MV Tarmugli, and later returned to the island in the afternoon, where they found at least 24 Sentinelese on the beach. One of the men aimed a bow and arrow at the team, but a woman pushed the arrow down, prompting the man to bury his weapon in the sand. For the first time, the Sentinelese approached the boats quite closely. The tribal welfare director then personally handed over 5 bags of coconuts. In 1995, the Indian government decided not to forcibly contact or assimilate the Sentinelese into modern civilization. By 1996, all visits to North Sentinel Island were completely stopped. In 2004, a massive tsunami devastated the Indian Ocean region, displacing hundreds of thousands of people and claiming many lives. This natural disaster also significantly affected North Sentinel Island. Tectonic activity caused the island and nearby seabed to rise by almost 2 meters. This uplift exposed the surrounding coral reef, which dried out and eventually died. These changes are visible in satellite images starting in 2004. Following the tsunami, an Indian helicopter flew over the island to check if the Sentinelese needed assistance. The islanders, however, emerged and aimed their arrows at the helicopter, clearly signaling they wanted no contact. In 2018, John Allen Chow, a Christian missionary, attempted to visit North Sentinel Island. Believing he was uniquely capable of conquering its isolation, John was born on December 18, 1991, in Scottsboro, Alabama. His father, Patrick Chow, a Chinese-American psychiatrist, while his mother, Linda Adams Chow, was an organizer for Chi Alpha. John grew up in a warm and loving family with an older brother and sister. Both of his parents were devout Christians, contributing to their successful academic careers. While his siblings pursued college and careers in medicine, John chose a different path. He developed a strong passion for Christianity and travel. John loved outdoor activities and often went hiking with friends. From a young age, he dreamed of living on an uninhabited island, combining his passion for adventure and his faith. He decided to become a missionary. He traveled extensively, meeting people and spreading the Christian faith. At the age of 17, he learned about the isolated North Sentinel Island and its inhabitants. John believed he could help the Sentinelese by introducing them to Christianity and connecting them with God. In 2015, John took his first trip to the Andaman Islands. Although he avoided getting too close to North Sentinel Island, he began studying the area, building connection, and preparing for a future mission. He returned home without visiting the island he had dreamed of, but resolved to go back. By 2016, John was living in California, working as a guide, and traveling across the United States. Next year, he also organized a missionary training camp to teach others how to engage with remote tribes. John became deeply fixated on North Sentinel Island and frequently discussed it with friends and family. He shared his plans to visit the island. John believed it was his divine mission to tell the Sentinelese about God and bring light to their dark world. In October 2018, John traveled to Port Blair to prepare for his trip to the island. He created picture cards for communication, collected gifts for the islanders, and bought medical supplies and other essential items to prioritize the safety of the Sentinelese to minimize health risks. He vaccinated himself against common viruses and self-quarantined for 11 days, despite efforts. John could not secure official permission, making his trip illegal under Indian law. Determined to proceed, he approached local fishermen and eventually convinced 3 of them to take him close to the island for $400 late on the night of November 14, 2018. The fishermen secretly took John aboard their motorboat and set out to sea. Their destination was about 60 miles away. By early morning on November 15, they reached the waters near North Sentinel Island, despite the fishermen's warnings. John left the boat, got into his canoe, and paddled alone toward the shore. As he approached, the Sentinelese noticed him while he was still in the water. They shouted in their language, clearly expressing their displeasure at the unexpected visitor. The islanders exchanged looks and then decided to defend their territory. They aimed their arrows at John, who panicked and quickly retreated to his canoe, paddling as fast as he could. He returned to the motorboat, narrowly escaping harm. Although terrified by the experience, John was deeply disappointed. His mission had failed, and all his efforts felt futile. The next day, John decided to return to the island. As he paddled toward the shore, he heard the cries of the islanders and the sound of drums. Soon, he noticed a man standing on a high coral reef. The man, his chest painted white, said something to John. In an attempt to communicate, John repeated the man's words and sang a prayer in response. The islander laughed loudly. Suddenly, more Sentinelese appeared on the shore. Gathering into a crowd, John offered them gifts, but 2 men dragged his canoe into the dense forest. At one point, a young islander aimed an arrow directly at him. Panicking, John held up his Bible. The arrow struck the Bible, sparing him. Startled and afraid, John fled into the water. He swam as fast as he could. Once he could no longer touch the sea floor. After swimming about a mile, he reached the fisherman's boat that had brought him to the island and managed to escape to safety. Disheartened, that day, he wrote in his journal, "Lord, is this island Satan's last stronghold, where none have heard or even had the chance to hear your name? The eternal lives of this tribe is at hand, and I think it's worthwhile to declare Jesus to these people. Please do not be angry at them or at God. If I get killed, don't retrieve my body." Early on the morning of November 17, John set out once more for the wild island, this time in a motorboat with the fishermen. Before switching to his canoe, he wrote in his journal, "I hope this is not my last entry, but if it is, glory to God." Wearing only black shorts, John climbed into his canoe and paddled alone toward North Sentinel Island. For the 3rd time, the fishermen stayed in the motorboat at sea with John's belongings, waiting for him until the afternoon. When John failed to return, they left and went home. The following day, the fishermen returned to the island to observe the shoreline from a distance and search for John. They noticed something unusual on the shore. As they looked closer, they realized it was a motionless man, resembling John, dressed in black shorts. While they watched, the Sentinelese came on, dragged the body off the beach, and disappeared into the jungle. Frightened, the fisherman returned to Port Blair and informed John's family of his death. John's parents, friends, colleagues, and acquaintances were heartbroken. Though they understood the drastic decision he had made in pursuit of his missionary work, the authorities now faced two key questions: what steps to take next, and whether to attempt retrieving John's body to return it to his homeland. Upon examining John's journal, the police discovered an entry where he had written, "If it happens that I am killed, I ask that my body not be taken from the island." 3 days after John's death, his family shared a post on social network, announcing that John had died in India while engaging with the Sentinelese tribe on the Andaman Islands. Part of their message read, "We forgive those reportedly responsible for his death. He went to them willingly, and no one should face prosecution because of his actions." The authorities ultimately decided not to file any criminal charges. The fishermen who had transported John to the remote island were released on bail. Despite several attempts by the Indian police to recover John's body, the operation was deemed too dangerous, and officials chose not to proceed. To this day, John's death has not been officially confirmed. His mother, Linda, continues to believe that her son is still alive and living on the island. She tells the media that John will return one day and share the truth himself. Meanwhile, his father, Patrick, holds the missionary organization responsible for John's death, accusing them of pressuring his son into taking such extreme risks and encouraging him to visit the perilous island. The future of the Sentinelese remains uncertain. Will they be able to preserve their way of life on their secluded island? In a way, their independence from the challenges of modern life could even inspire a sense of admiration. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Stephanie Flores Ramirez. Stephanie Flores Ramirez was born on July 22, 1988, to Ricardo Flores and Maria Elena Ramirez. She was a kind and easygoing child. Her family was quite wealthy. Her father was involved in the auto racing industry and was building a successful political career. Stephanie grew up in a prestigious family. Her 4 brothers were all from the upper class and had access to the best education. Stephanie excelled in school, earning the admiration and respect of her teachers and classmates. In 2008, at the age of 20, Stephanie enrolled at the University of San Martin de Porres to study business administration. By 2010, as a third-year student, she had many great ideas and hopes for her future. Despite her innocent appearance and excellent academic performance, Stephanie knew how to enjoy life. With a lot of money at her disposal, she frequented the best nightclubs and casinos in the country. On the night of May 30, 2010, at a casino called Atlantic City, Stephanie met a mysterious man named Joran van der Sloot at around 3 a.m. She sat down at the poker table next to him, and they were instantly attracted to each other, although they came from different countries. They both spoke fluent English and quickly found common ground. Stephanie was drawn to Joran's confidence and easygoing demeanor, while he was captivated by her beauty and smile. During their conversation, Stephanie asked Joran how he came to Lima. He said he was on vacation to escape some personal troubles. At that time, Stephanie had no idea that his troubles were related to the murder of a woman. Joran deceived her by claiming that he was the son of a wealthy lawyer and judge. This made Stephanie feel safe, as she believed that someone from a wealthy family like hers could not be dangerous. They talked at the poker table late into the night. Stephanie was an experienced gambler, knowing how to assess odds and calculate how to win money. Just a few days earlier, she had won $10 in a game after hours of chatting. They had consumed a considerable amount of alcohol. What started as a casual conversation gradually turned into flirting. Eventually, Joran invited Stephanie to spend the night with him, and to her surprise, she agreed. They went to a hotel in the Miraflores area, where Joran rented a room. There are differing accounts of whether the pair became intimate. Some say they had an intimate encounter, while others claim that Stephanie simply went to his room to continue playing online poker. The details of that night are somewhat unclear, however. It is confirmed that at some point, Stephanie accessed Joran's laptop. Stephanie later learned of Joran's connection to Natalie Holloway's death. She had been lured into a dangerous situation, and now she was trapped with a criminal. Stephanie tried to escape, but was unable to. When Joran realized she had discovered his secret, he became furious. A struggle ensued. He hit Stephanie in the nose with a crowbar, causing her to bleed mercilessly. Joran overpowered her and began strangling her. He then continued to attack her until she stopped breathing. When morning came, Stephanie still hadn't returned home. Her father, Ricardo, grew increasingly worried as time passed. He knew his daughter always came home, which made him fear that something was wrong. He contacted his son, Enrique, for help in finding Stephanie. They called Stephanie's co-workers, but when they found nothing, they contacted the police to report her missing. Ricardo discovered that his daughter had been gambling the night before. Peruvian police then went to Atlantic City to investigate further. There, they reviewed surveillance camera footage of Stephanie playing poker and drinking during the night. She met a tall young man. The police quickly identified him and obtained his national identification number. From that point on, Joran van der Sloot became the prime suspect in Stephanie's disappearance. It was discovered that the two had left the casino together around 5 a.m. that morning, although their exact destination was initially unclear. It was noted that they were returning to the hotel where Joran was staying. The footage showed the pair entering his hotel room. Hours later, Joran left the room alone, but returned with 2 cups of coffee and a loaf of bread. 3 hours after they entered, Joran left the room again, still alone. As he left, he informed a hotel employee that Stephanie was still in the room, but asked that she not be disturbed as she was only sleeping. On June 2, 3 days after Stephanie's death, and after Joran had checked out, a hotel employee discovered her body in room 309. Police found a tennis racket in the room, believed to be the weapon used in the attack. After verifying the name associated with the room, police confirmed that it was Joran van der Sloot. After leaving the hotel, he left the TV on full volume, possibly creating the illusion that someone was still inside. Police were unable to determine where he went after the crime. In an effort to quickly identify Joran, the police released his information and photo to all media outlets. In further investigation, police learned that Joran van der Sloot was born on August 6, 1987, into a wealthy family. He has 2 older brothers. His mother is an art teacher, and his father has a well-paying job that provides for the family. They live a comfortable life. Enjoying traveling, Joran attends a local international school, where he is a diligent student. He is tall, attractive, and athletic, participating in football and tennis while regularly practicing with his father. Despite doing well in school, Joran was a spoiled brat and a habitual liar. In contrast to his calm older brothers, he displayed arrogant and flamboyant behavior, often sneaking out at night to go to casinos. In 2005, he met an American girl named Natalie Holloway. As their relationship developed, Joran expressed a desire to be intimate with her. When Natalie refused, he became violent and kicked her in the head when she was unconscious. He abused her to cover up his crime. He murdered her. The case of Natalie's disappearance and Joran's involvement attracted international media attention. Maintaining public interest for a decade, Joran was the prime suspect from the beginning. But due to numerous legal issues, he could not be convicted despite repeated interrogations and detentions. How did Joran get to Lima? And where did he get the money for the trip? In fact, he blackmailed Natalie's family, promising to reveal the location of their daughter's body in exchange for cash. After receiving a portion of the money, Joran fled to Lima to pursue his gambling ventures there. At a casino in Atlantic City, he met his second victim, Stephanie, whom he killed on the 5th anniversary of Natalie's death. Joran became the prime suspect in the case. leading to his placement on Interpol's wanted list. Police in neighboring countries were informed of the situation. His whereabouts were soon traced. When he entered Chile via the Chacaluta border, police confirmed that he was in Chile. After tracing him, he was later found after taking a taxi in Vina del Mar, a coastal city. Chilean police arrested him as he was walking toward Santiago. Joran was immediately taken into custody, and the bloodied clothing of the victim, Stephanie, was found in his possession. Initially, Joran denied any involvement in her death, claiming that armed robbers had attacked them in their hotel room. He alleged that when Stephanie refused to cooperate, they killed her. This explanation was seen as an attempt to evade responsibility. On July 5, after Joran was deported to Peru, an official investigation began. He was questioned, and after several days of police interrogation, he realized he had no way out and confessed to the crime. In his written statement, he detailed the events that took place that night. He claimed that he had left the hotel to buy coffee and bread, but when he returned, he discovered that Stephanie was using his computer and that she knew he was involved in Natalie's death. According to Joran, when he tried to explain with Stephanie, she hit him and ran toward the door. He then stopped her. He insisted that he never intended to kill her. However, when she invaded his privacy without permission, he became angry, lost control, and ultimately took Stephanie's life. Joran claimed that he drank coffee laced with an illegal pill, then packed his things and left the hotel. Subsequent toxicology tests showed no trace of any pills in his system, suggesting that he may have used this strategy to reduce his sentence in Peru. Crimes committed under the influence of illegal substances often result in lighter sentences, and it appears that Joran's attorneys were aware of this and sought to exploit it. Joran was subsequently arrested on charges of robbery and first-degree murder. Given the severity of Joran's actions and the wealth of his family, the judge denied his request for bail on the morning of the trial. An angry crowd gathered outside the courthouse, expressing their outrage by throwing fruit and eggs at Joran as he was escorted inside. Joran had previously been held in a maximum security prison in South America, known for its harsh conditions, where he was constantly monitored. He was offered a chance to be transferred to a prison in Aruba if he revealed the location of Natalie's body, but he refused the offer. Joran's attorneys have argued that Joran lost control during the attack on Stephanie because she took his laptop without permission. If the judge had accepted this argument, Joran could have faced a lighter sentence of only 3 to 5 years in prison, and with good behavior, he might have been released after 20 months. However, these efforts have failed. On January 11, 2012, Joran van der Sloot pleaded guilty to the murder and robbery of Stephanie Flores Ramirez. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison and ordered to pay $75 to Stephanie's family. This marked the end of Stephanie's case. However, Joran's criminal story is not over yet. He was recently extradited to the United States to face charges of extorting Natalie's parents. Concerned that his sentence could be longer than life, he decided to plead guilty. Natalie Holloway's case took a turn when Joran van der Sloot pleaded guilty to extortion and wire fraud. The plea added 20 years to his sentence, which he would have to serve after his release from a Peruvian prison. Although Joran confessed to killing Natalie, he was not punished for that crime. Instead, he was sentenced to a total of 28 years in a Peruvian prison. After serving his sentence, he was transferred to a U.S. prison to serve an additional 20 years for extorting Natalie's family. During this time, little was known about what happened. Notably, Joran's father, who had supported him, died of a heart attack. Although Joran faced a total of 48 years in prison, many felt that this punishment was insufficient given his cruelty. Stephanie and Natalie lived short but vibrant lives, filled with love and the promise of a bright future. Their families and friends are devastated by the loss of their beautiful daughters, sisters, and girlfriends. It is heartbreaking to know that their lives were taken by a criminal with no compassion. If Joran had been incarcerated sooner, with enough evidence against him, Stephanie might still be alive today. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Daniel LaPlante. In 1986, Frank Bowen, with his two daughters, Tina Bowen and Karen Bowen, experienced a series of terrifying events at their home in Townsend, Massachusetts. The girls initially believed that the house was haunted when strange phenomena began to occur, such as furniture being shuffled, strange noises coming from the walls, and threatening words written on mirrors and walls in a red material that looked like blood. These events left the family in extreme fear. Frank Bowen initially thought that his daughters were imagining things or playing a prank, but all doubts disappeared when he was faced with the terrifying truth. The person behind these bizarre events was Daniel LaPlante, a 16-year-old boy who lived nearby. In addition to trying to scare the Bowen family, Daniel secretly lived in their house for about 2 months. Taking refuge in the walls and narrow spaces between rooms, Daniel used secret passageways in the house to spy on and manipulate the family. The truth was discovered when Mr. Frank found Daniel in the house, confronting him with a weapon in his hand. Police later determined that Daniel had cut holes in the walls to move around undetected, turning the Frank home into a hiding place. Daniel LaPlante, often referred to as Danny, was born on May 15, 1970, in Townsend, Massachusetts. He grew up with his parents and 2 brothers, but his childhood was far from happy. Daniel endured various forms of abuse from his father, including physical, emotional, and abuse. After cutting ties with his father, Daniel began living with another man, who also treated him cruelly. Their home was an unhealthy environment, filthy and cluttered with garbage, with a yard full of trash and stray animals roaming freely. This atmosphere contributed to Daniel's growing disillusionment with life. He became rebellious, and his teachers frequently complained about his behavior. What began as troubling behavior eventually escalated into self-destructive tendencies. Daniel struggled socially, performed poorly in school, and was described by his classmates as strange, unhygienic, and unpleasant. Most avoided him because of his appearance and behavior, concerned by his actions. The school referred Daniel to a psychiatrist for help. During their sessions, it was discovered that Daniel had dyslexia and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. While the psychiatrist initially appeared to want to help, he instead exploited Daniel's vulnerabilities. Over the course of a year, the psychiatrist coerced Daniel into an abuse relationship, further compounding the trauma he had already endured throughout his life. By 1986, as a teenager, desperate to escape his life of torment, Abuse began committing petty thefts in his neighbors' homes. Initially, he focused on stealing specific items, but over time, he shifted his focus to instilling fear in the residents. He started leaving cryptic, unsettling messages, rearranging household items to confuse the homeowners, and scattering crumbs and food stains throughout the houses. One of the homes he targeted belonged to the Bowen family. The Bowen family lived in Townsend, Massachusetts. In the same county as Daniel, the household consisted of Frank and his 2 daughters. The girls' mother had recently passed away from cancer, leaving the family grief-stricken and struggling to adjust to their drastically changed lives. When Daniel broke into their home, he noticed the family portraits, which radiated a sense of closeness and warmth. This enraged Daniel, who felt deeply unhappy with his own life. To him, such a family seemed like an impossible dream. It was then that he devised a sinister plan. Toward the end of 1986, one evening, Tina Bowen received an anonymous call from a young man who introduced himself as Daniel LaPlante. When Tina asked how he had gotten her phone number, Daniel claimed he attended the same school as her and had obtained it through a mutual friend. Curious, Tina asked if they had met before, and Daniel provided a false description of himself to spark her interest. He claimed to have bright blonde hair, an athletic build, and said He lived in her neighborhood during their conversations, which continued for about a week. Daniel was very polite and charming, successfully gaining Tina's trust. After much persuasion, Daniel convinced Tina to go on a date with him. He offered to pick her up from her home, and his imagined charm seemed to win her over. However, when the big evening arrived, Daniel made no effort to clean up his appearance when he showed up at the Bowen house and rang the doorbell. Tina immediately realized that everything he had claimed on the phone was untrue. As she opened the door, she saw that Daniel looked nothing like his description. His clothes were dirty, his physique was far from athletic, and his hair was dark instead of blonde. Despite her disappointment, Tina felt there might still be some trace of the charming man she had spoken with beneath it all. So, she decided to give him a chance. While they were walking together, Tina shared with Daniel that her mother had recently passed away from cancer. Instead of offering comfort, Daniel began asking her unsettling questions about her mother's appearance after death, what it was like to witness death up close, and the extent of her mother's suffering before she passed. The conversation was so unusual and inappropriate that it felt nothing like the casual evening chats Tina was used to. An hour into the date, Tina didn't leave, though she found the entire experience deeply strange and upsetting. She had never encountered someone so fixated on her mother's death, and Daniel's blunt, insensitive questions showed no regard for the pain she and her family had endured. This left she feeling profoundly sad. Tina later expressed her sadness to her younger sister, saying how much she missed their mother and how desperately she wished to speak with her again. One evening, while home alone, Tina and her sister decided to try contacting their mother's spirit using a Ouija board. They went down to the basement and, with little expectation that it would work, began the ritual. However, their efforts were unsuccessful when they heard their father returning from work. The sisters quickly hid the Ouija board and went back to their room. Later that night, just after midnight, Tina and Karen were startled awake by a series of knocks on their bedroom wall. Excited, the sisters believed it was their mother attempting to communicate with them. They felt their spiritualism session had not been in vain when they asked directly if it was truly their mother. A loud knock sounded on the wall, which the girls took as a definite yes. For several nights, strange events continued to occur, but only Tina and Karen were aware of them. However, when they tried to show their father the supernatural activity, nothing happened. It all began with faint knocks on the walls, but soon objects started disappearing. Items left on the table were found scattered on the floor the next day. The girls noticed furniture moving on its own, and food and drinks vanishing mysteriously. These occurrences unsettled them, and they began doubting that it was their mother trying to communicate. After all, their mom wouldn't frighten them like this. When the girls explained everything to Frank, he dismissed their claims. He believed the so-called supernatural events were just the girls acting out. Frank assumed Tina and Karen were seeking attention and tried to remain patient, convinced they would eventually overcome their pain. However, as time went on, Tina and Karen became increasingly terrified of their own home. The knocks on the walls and other strange happenings were driving them to the brink. Still, Frank refused to believe Tina and Karen. In desperation, Tina decided to confront the spirit directly. Now, she's certain it wasn't their late mother. Tina grabbed a knife from the kitchen and, along with Karen, went down to the basement. On one of the walls, they found a message written in red letters, which they immediately assumed was blood. The message read, "I am in your room. Find me." Terrified, Tina and Karen ran to the neighbor's house, desperate to escape the torment they believed was caused by the spirit they had summoned. Tina and Karen anxiously waited for their father to return home from work. When Frank arrived, he immediately noticed the chaos upon seeing the message on the basement wall. He quickly realized it was written in tomato sauce. Furious, he lashed out at his daughters, scolding them for going too far and damaging their own home. He told them they needed a healthier way to deal with their pain, and even threatened to send Tina and Karen to a psychotherapist after this unsettling incident. Everything seemed to go back to normal. The supernatural events stopped, and the family began to relax. Life resumed its usual peaceful rhythm. The girls behaved calmly, and Frank continued his work as if nothing had happened. However, one day, a knock on the wall signaled the ghost's return. Tina and Karen, consumed by fear, returned to the basement, where all their troubles had begun. Suddenly, they heard another loud knock from upstairs. Panicked, they ran to Tina's bedroom, only to find a chilling message written in large red letters on the wall. "I'm back. Find me if you can." Tina grabbed her sister's hand, and they fled the house, seeking help from their neighbor, alarmed by the sister's story and their state. The neighbor promptly called Frank to inform him of what was happening. When Frank heard that his daughters were involved in another disturbing incident, he rushed home to address the situation. Convinced his daughter's actions were escalating, he decided to get to the bottom of it. Upon arriving at the neighbor's house, Frank questioned Tina and Karen about the events, shaking with fear. They said everything, including the unsettling message they had discovered, determined to put an end to their fears. Frank decided to go back to the house alone to investigate. As he stepped inside, Frank was met with chaos. The entire house was in disarray. Clothes and belongings were scattered across the floor. He immediately realized this mess was far beyond what his daughters could have caused. When he entered Tina's bedroom, he found the same disturbing message the girls had described earlier, and now an additional chilling note was scrawled beneath it. "Marry me, confused and uneasy." Frank felt something was terribly wrong. A shiver ran down his spine as he sensed a presence behind him. Turning around, his heart sank. In the corner of the room stood a young man. The man was dressed in Frank's late wife's wedding dress and a blonde wig, even more horrifying. He was holding an axe, though shaken to his core. Frank quickly realized one thing. This was no ghost. Frank chased the intruder until this man fled and disappeared from sight immediately afterward. He called the police. Investigators conducted a thorough search of the house and discovered a hidden space behind a closet in one of the rooms. Inside the wall, they found a small door leading to an underground cavity or passageway between the house's walls, large enough for someone to move through. When a police officer entered the hidden area, they found Daniel curled up in a ball in one corner. Daniel was arrested, with Frank identifies him as the man in the wedding dress who threatened Frank with an axe. Later, authorities uncovered more troubling details about the incident. Tina confided in her father about an unsettling date she had gone on with Daniel a few months earlier. Investigators determined that Daniel had used the hidden passageways to torment Tina and Karen inside the space. Police found a sleeping bag, clothing belonging to the family, and leftover food. The most disturbing discovery, however, was that the secret space connected to every room in the house. This allowed Daniel to move through the walls undetected, spy on the family, and communicate with the girls through the distinct knocking sounds that had terrified them at the time of his arrest. 16-year-old Daniel was sent to a juvenile facility when he turned 17. Court documents were filed to begin trying his case as an adult. He faced multiple charges, including robbery, burglary, and property damage. In October 1987, Daniel was released on bail after his mother paid nearly $10 for his release. After returning to his mother and stepfather's home, Daniel was instructed to stay out of trouble and await his court date on December 11, 1987. However, he ignored these instructions and resumed burglarizing nearby homes. During one of these break-ins, he found a weapon, which he took with him. In November, his stepfather discovered the weapon hidden in a laundry basket. When confronted, Daniel lied and refused to reveal where he had obtained the weapon, although his stepfather confiscated it. It was unclear whether Daniel had access to another one. On December 1, 1987, Daniel walked approximately 2 kilometers to reach the large, comfortable mansion of the Gustafson family. The family consisted of 33-year-old Priscilla, her husband Andrew, their 2 children, 7-year-old Abigail and 5-year-old William. and Priscilla is pregnant with their third child. The Gustafson family were a close-knit family dedicated to helping others. Andrew worked as a lawyer and was often away from home, while Priscilla worked at a kindergarten, sang in a choir, and actively participated in their church. On that tragic day, when Daniel broke into their home, only Priscilla and William were there. At this time, Abigail was still at school. He overpowered Priscilla, dragged her into the bedroom, and assaulted her. Afterwards, he suffocated her with a pillow to muffle the sound, and then attacked her twice in the head. Once Priscilla was dead, Daniel turned his attention to William. He carried the boy to a filled bathtub on the second floor and drowned him. Shortly after Abigail arrived home from school, Daniel immediately grabbed Abigail, took her to the bathtub on the first floor, and drowned her in it. Just like William, when Andrew arrived at the house around 6 p.m., he immediately sensed something was wrong. The children were not playing as they usually did, and his wife did not come to greet him in the hallway when he called out for Priscilla. There was no response. Concerned, Andrew went to the bedroom, where he discovered a horrifying scene. Priscilla was lying lifeless in an unnatural position, with bloodstains all around, in shock. Andrew called the police right away. He could not even search the house to find the children when the investigators arrived. They found Andrew in such a state of shock that he was unable to think clearly during their search of the house. The police discovered the bodies of the children. Among the evidence collected were 2 spent cartridges from a weapon, strands of the attacker's hair on the bed and on Priscilla's body, an open beer can, and shoe prints near the entrance. Suspicion quickly fell on Daniel, a recently paroled young man who lived near the Gustafson home. He was known for his skill in breaking into nearby houses, which made him a prime suspect. While investigators were searching for him, Daniel was at the city library when questioned about his whereabouts on December 1. He claimed he had been at a family birthday party. He denied any involvement in the case of the Gustafson family and expressed sorrow over what had occurred. The police initially appeared to believe his story, but later, they visited Daniel's home with additional questions and a search warrant. When Daniel was sitting on the porch, spotted the police car. He immediately realized they were there for him, so he fled and hid in the woods. Daniel's actions confirmed the investigators' suspicions were right, and them to search Daniel's house inside. They discovered several shoe soles that matched the footprints found near the Gustafson home. They also found fibers that appeared to be connected to the crime. A sock with saliva stains likely used to gag Priscilla. A .22 caliber shell casing similar to one found at the crime scene, and a cordless phone stolen from the Gustafson home. Additionally, the Daniel family's car was examined. They revealing weapon in the glove compartment. Police quickly called for reinforcements to search for Daniel, the main suspect in the case of the Gustafson family. Over 50 officers participated in the search, aided by helicopters and sniffer dogs that thoroughly combed the forest. A crucial tip came from an emergency call. The caller revealed that Daniel had threatened her with a gun and forced her to drive him away in her truck. Thankfully, she managed to escape. This information helped investigators identify the model of the car Daniel used to flee on the run. He committed several additional robberies, leaving witnesses at the scenes who later reported him to the police. Daniel LaPlante was arrested on December 3, 1987, at 6:03 p.m. while trying to hide behind a garbage can in Ayers Town. At the time of his arrest, he was armed and had committed several crimes while evading capture. Daniel's trial began in October 1988, when he was 18 years old, although most of his crimes occurred when he was a minor. The judge decided to try him as an adult. Daniel pleaded not guilty. Despite strong evidence against him, Daniel's defense claimed he was mentally unfit to stand trial, but a psychiatric evaluation determined that he could understand right from wrong and was fit for trial. The jury found Daniel LaPlante guilty of murdering the Gustafson family and sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole in 1993. Daniel attempted to appeal his sentence, arguing that the search warrant for his home was issued improperly, but he was unsuccessful. In 2000, Daniel requested a transfer to another prison due to safety concerns after receiving threats from fellow inmates, and this request was approved. Then, in 2013, Daniel expressed dissatisfaction with not being allowed to practice his religion freely because his rituals would have required ingredients like blood and banned substance. In 2017, Daniel submitted a petition seeking a reduced sentence, claiming he was under 18 when he committed the crimes, so he should not be sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. He aimed to serve just one life sentence instead of 3 consecutive ones. However, his request was denied because he was required to serve time for each life he had ruined. His statement to the judge was as follows: "I cannot adequately express the weight of my actions. I have taken the lives of 3 innocent people because of my choices. A 5-year-old boy will never celebrate his 6th birthday, and 7-year-old girls will never turn 8. Their mother will not have a 3rd child, and I have robbed an unborn baby of its first breath. This woman may never hear the words, 'I love you' again to my family. I am deeply sorry for the pain I have caused. My remorse is profound and heartfelt." In 2019, Daniel LaPlante applied for parole again, but the authorities was decided that his request would not be reviewed until 2032. Many believe that Daniel lacks the capacity for remorse or any genuine feelings, and they see him as someone who is capable of psychological torment and brutal killings. This raises concerns that if he is released, he may seek out new victims. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of April Millsap. What could happen to a young woman simply walking through a quiet suburban neighborhood that is considered one of the safest in America? Normally, there would be nothing to worry about, but when a real predator lurks in the shadows, even the safest places can become the scene of a horrific tragedy. April Millsap, 14 years old by the summer of 2014. She was living with her family in Armada, a small town in Michigan, USA. April was a friendly and sweet girl who attended a local high school. She was an only child, and her parents had divorced when she was 6. After the divorce, her mother began a relationship with another man, who later became April's stepfather. April quickly grew close to her stepfather, and they developed a warm bond. April was a cheerful girl with a sense of humor, always bringing joy to her family. Her positive attitude helped her form a close circle of friends. She was creative, loved drawing, stayed active, and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Despite her young age, April seemed mature and independent by the time she turned 14. She often walked her dog alone and enjoyed spending time with her friends while maintaining a close relationship with her family. April also had a boyfriend named Austin Schutt, who was a year older than her. They attended the same school and had been dating for about a year at the time of these events. In 2014, the town of Armada had a population of about 1.7 people. It was considered a safe and family-friendly place where everyone knew each other. However, as life sometimes proves, even the safest places can attract danger. Crimes in Armada were rare, but when they did occur, they caused significant alarm. On July 24, 2014, the summer holidays were in full swing. That day, April didn't have any plans to go out or meet friends. She slept until noon and spent most of the day on her computer, chatting with friends and playing games. Around 6 p.m., she decided to take her dog, Penny, for a walk. April often brought Penny along when she met friends or her boyfriend, Austin. That evening, she chose one of her usual walking routes, which she often used to relax. Her walks typically lasted no more than an hour. Her mother, Jennifer, waited for her at home without concern, but when an hour and a half passed and April still hadn't returned, Jennifer became increasingly anxious when April didn't respond to her calls or text messages. So she reached out to April's boyfriend, assuming they might be together. However, Austin told her He hadn't seen April all day and had only communicated with her online. Jennifer's worry deepened, and she began contacting April's friends and classmates, but no one knew where April could be. About half an hour later, there was a knock at the door, hoping it was April returning from her walk. Jennifer felt a brief sense of relief. Instead, she found Austin and his friends standing on the doorstep. They had come to check on April because they were also concerned. Austin then showed Jennifer a message he had received from April at 6:28 p.m., roughly 40 minutes after she had left the house to walk the dog. Although Austin initially said he hadn't heard from her, he admitted to seeing the message later, either because he hadn't noticed it right away or he had been out of network coverage at the time. The message contained a chilling statement. "They tried to kidnap me." Alarmed by this, Austin had immediately started searching for her, realizing the seriousness of the situation. Jennifer called her husband, who at work, alarmed. He left his job immediately to join the search. He joined Jennifer and Austin, and the three decided to split up to cover more ground along the routes April usually walked. Jennifer also contacted the police, who promptly joined the efforts to find April. Shortly afterward, April was found. A man and a woman jogging along one of the trails came across a dog on a leash. Penny the dog seemed extremely agitated. When the woman attempted to grab the leash, Penny ran off but stopped periodically. As if trying to guide them somewhere, they followed Penny into a dense thicket, where they discovered the body of a girl. The victim was later identified as 14-year-old April Millsap by the time her family arrived. Forensic experts were already working at the site. In Armada, the local police force consisted of only 2 officers, neither of whom was trained for cases of this nature. Serious crimes were almost unheard of in the area, and the small force was sufficient for handling minor issues like petty theft. However, this case was different. None of the local officers had ever dealt with a violent murder, and their investigative resources were minimal. The sheriff immediately reached out to more capable authorities at the county level. Law enforcement from other regions was quickly brought in to assist with the investigation. As they had more resources and experience, April was discovered lying on her back at the bottom of a ravine. Her shoes had been removed and were found a few meters away. Her clothing and underwear had been pulled off, suggesting a clear abuse motive. However, further investigation revealed that she had not been abused. Detectives theorized that the attacker may have attempted but failed, possibly because April fought back fiercely or because something like a passerby or the dog interrupted the assault. Regardless, she was subjected to a brutal beating. Her body was covered in bruises, ranging from defensive wounds to severe injuries on her face, which was so disfigured it appeared almost crushed. The forensic examination identified at least 48 separate injuries, many concentrated on her face and neck. Her body was covered in dried blood. There were signs of compression on her neck, but they didn't match the typical patterns seen in manual strangulation or the use of an object. Instead, the injuries on her face and neck bore unusual marks, which forensic analysis confirmed were caused by the tread of a shoe. This indicated that the attacker had stomped on her repeatedly. The forensic report concluded that April's death was the result of being trampled. Marks resembling the sole of a large sneaker were found on her head and neck. Considering the level of violence and the potential motive, investigators believed the perpetrator was likely a large man. The forensic expert concluded that the attack lasted over 10 minutes, during which the girl endured immense agony before dying. Identifying the victim initially proved difficult due to the severe facial injuries, which rendered her unrecognizable. Similarly, her mother was already unidentifiable from the start. The girl's stepmother, boyfriend, and the boyfriend's friend were brought in for police questioning to narrow down the list of possible suspects. The initial investigation focused on her mother, Jennifer, to determine if there were any events or threats that could be related to the case. However, investigators quickly determined that Jennifer had no conflicts, troubles, or unusual events related to her daughter's death. After ruling this possibility out. They turned their attention to April's boyfriend, Austin. To continue to clarify the details of the case, suspicion arose when Austin admitted that his relationship with the victim had been strained recently. They argued often and were on the brink of breaking up shortly before the murder. They had a heated argument. Adding to investigators' doubts was a chilling message April had sent to Austin just before the crime. She told him that someone had attempted to kidnap her, but he chose to ignore this alarming warning. Austin claimed he couldn't respond because the message arrived too late for him to see it. It seems there was a delay in delivery. Detectives noted that after receiving the message, he reacted very slowly, did not inform the police, and instead decided to search for her on his own. Austin explained that he was still upset with his girlfriend and believed the message was an attempt to manipulate him. He thought she was trying to provoke his attention and concern, to push him toward reconciliation, not realizing the gravity of the situation regarding the quarrel. Austin insisted that April's behavior was incomprehensible. The most recent conflict had seemingly come out of nowhere, and he couldn't clearly explain the reasons behind their disagreements. Instead, he placed the blame on her. This only deepened the detective's suspicions, as it suggested Austin might have had a motive for the attack. In many cases, such incidents are committed by partners. As a result, the officers decided to detain him longer and asked him to tell them how his day went in all the details in order to analyze his movements and establish an alibi. Austin said that around 4 p.m., he met a friend to help carry a TV into a house afterward. They went to the nearest McDonald's for a snack. His account was later confirmed by surveillance camera footage from the cafe, which showed him there at the specified time, around 6:30 p.m. Just a few minutes after the message about the attempted kidnapping was sent, it became clear that Austin could not have been involved in the murder, since Austin was ruled out as the killer. Investigators turned their attention to the victim's mobile phone, hoping it might provide crucial information. They suspected April might have received a message from the stalker pursuing her, but her mobile phone could not be found at the crime scene. Detectives theorized that the killer had taken it, turned it off to prevent tracking, and discarded it elsewhere to find the phone and other evidence. A thorough search was conducted along the route April was believed to have taken, but no clues were initially found. Law enforcement, specialized dogs, and the FBI joined the search effort after nearly a full day of searching with no results. A breakthrough occurred the next day. The girl's mobile phone was discovered about a kilometer from the crime scene and was immediately sent to a forensic lab for analysis around the same time. News of the brutal attack spread widely through local newspapers and TV channels. Authorities appealed for witnesses who might have noticed anything unusual on the trail near the time of the crime. However, in the early stages, this only heightened public fear and anxiety. What shocked people most was the sheer brutality of the attack and the fact that it occurred in broad daylight, leaving everyone feeling unsafe. Then, a girl came forward to the police with potentially valuable information. She explained that around 6 p.m. on the day April was killed, she was at home looking out her window when she noticed a white van she had never seen before passing by. A man was driving, with another young man in the passenger seat. The van was moving very slowly, as if the occupants were searching for something or someone. This struck her as odd. When they noticed her watching from the window, they stopped and stared at her, even pointing toward her house. The encounter made her feel uneasy. Afterward, they drove away. Upon hearing about April's murder, the girl became worried that these two men might have been involved. She feared they could have spotted April as a target and attacked her. Detectives found this information reliable and important to the investigation. They considered it plausible that a white van had been driving around the area looking for a victim, and April was unfortunate enough to catch the men's attention. The police appealed to the public once again, sharing a description of the white van and a composite sketch of the two men inside, hoping to gather more reliable leads. The following day, a man and his friend contacted the police, They admitted to driving a van in the area that evening. They explained that they were construction workers and had been driving slowly through the neighborhood because the driver wanted to show his colleague some houses where he had previously worked. One of these houses happened to be where the girl lived. Their account was verified, and local residents confirmed their story. Clearing them of suspicion, the men were eager to assist the investigation in any way they could. The day after the incident, several people contacted the police to report a suspicious motorcycle and its driver. Witnesses reported seeing a schoolgirl walking her dog along a path around 6:30 p.m. They noted that she wasn't alone at the time. She was accompanied by an older man who was pushing his motorcycle by hand. The two appeared to be walking and talking casually at the time. The witnesses assumed the man was her father, as his behavior seemed calm and April showed no signs of fear. However, upon reflecting on the situation later, doubts about the man began to emerge. None of April's friends or family recognized him based on the description provided, suggesting he was a complete stranger to her, according to witnesses. This encounter occurred around the same time April had texted her boyfriend about an attempted kidnapping, raising further suspicions about the man, since there were very few motorcyclists in town. The man and his unusual motorcycle quickly caught the attention of locals. The motorcycle was described as having a rare blue and white color scheme, making it easy to identify thanks to this detailed description. Police located a motorcycle matching it just 3 days after April's murder, on April 27, 2014. It was found parked in the driveway of a local house. When officers arrived, the motorcycle was still there. The officers approached a man working in the garden, who told them the motorcycle did not belong to him. Instead, it belonged to his 32-year-old friend, James Donald Van Callis, who lived in the neighboring town. About 30 kilometers from Armada, this information was verified. On April 28, officers met with James, the owner of the motorcycle, to question him about his whereabouts on the day April was killed. From the start, James was cooperative and willing to answer all questions. He claimed he had been at a friend's house in Armada during that time, and his friend confirmed the alibi. However, authorities found the alibi unreliable, as the witness was a friend who might have been covering for him. Additionally, there were minor discrepancies in the timeline. When asked about the shoes he wore that day, James provided a pair of white sneakers. However, the tread on the shoes did not match the marks found on the victim's body. Detectives decided to take a closer look at James to eliminate him as a potential suspect. While he had a criminal record, it was not for violent offenses. His convictions included breaking, as well as failing to pay child support, and the robberies occurring in 2005 and 2006. However, upon reviewing James's background, the police uncovered something far more alarming. His father, James Bernard Van Callis, was a registered abuse offender. The elder James Bernard had been convicted of abusing a 13-year-old minor at the time. Both men lived in the same family home. Authorities considered the possibility that James Bernard and James Donald might be involved in criminal activities. However, the investigation primarily focused on the son, as witnesses had identified a middle-aged man matching the witness's description. Searches of their home revealed that James Bernard and James Donald were growing the territory of the prohibited plant. The quantity was so large that they were arrested and charged with distributing the prohibited banned substance. This allowed law enforcement to detain them, ensuring public safety and preventing the suspects from fleeing the state. While the investigation continued, the police thoroughly inspected all the shoes found in the men's house, but none matched the tread marks found on the victim's body. Additionally, numerous DNA tests were conducted on the clothing, but no traces linked to April were discovered. However, forensic experts who examined the motorcycle were confident that James Donald had used strong cleaning agents shortly before it was seized by the police for analysis. They suspected this was an attempt to remove evidence. James Donald was quite successful. As the police no traces were found, the detectives quickly confirmed their theory when James Donald's girlfriend contacted the police. She reported that on the day of the murder, in April, she came home to find he meticulously cleaning his shoes, motorcycle, and helmet with strong disinfectants. This unusual behavior made her suspicious. The injuries on the victim's head were consistent with marks that could have been caused by a helmet, leading investigators to believe James Donald might have used it during the assault. She also revealed that he had traveled by car that day to a nearby town where the victim lived. Supposedly to visit his friend, James Donald's girlfriend described a pair of black and white sneakers that James Donald frequently wore and loved. However, these shoes did not match the ones he handed over to detectives when they questioned him. After that night, she never saw those sneakers again, leading her to believe James Donald had disposed of them. Fearing he couldn't fully clean away the evidence, she further detailed her troubling relationship with James Donald, describing him as extremely abusive and controlling. Recently, she had felt more like his hostage or property than his girlfriend. He tightly controlled every aspect of her life, even forbidding her from leaving the house unless he accompanied her. She suspected him from the start, but feared he would kill her if she contacted the police. Now that James Bernard and James Donald had been arrested, she could finally speak freely. According to James Donald's own admission to his girlfriend, he claimed he was cleaning his belongings because they had been stained with machine oil while fixing his motorbike. However, she remained unconvinced. The police needed to confirm that the sneakers she described matched the ones James Donald commonly wore. They found photos on his social media page showing him wearing sneakers identical to her description, although James Donald had disposed of the pair he wore during the murder. The police located and purchased the same model when they compared the tread pattern to the marks on the victim's body. Forensic experts found an exact match. The investigation revealed that April had been trampled to death with shoes James Donald had purchased about a year before the attack. Further evidence was found on his computer, where investigators uncovered his disturbing interest in much younger girls. Additionally, crucial information came from April's phone using FBI lab analysis. It was discovered that she had a fitness app installed, which monitored her movements, steps, and heart rate, among other data. Shortly after sending a worrying message to her boyfriend, Austin, the data showed she suddenly began running, as if trying to escape from someone. James Donald reportedly approached the girl on his motorcycle and offered her something. Shortly afterward, she sent her boyfriend a message about an attempted kidnapping. Then she ran really fast to escape her pursuer. Minutes later, her fitness app recorded a sudden, chaotic, and extremely fast increase in her movements, lasting 10 to 15 minutes. This appears to have been the moment she fought for her life. Later, the criminal returned to his vehicle with the April's phone. The app recorded a steady speed of about 20 kilometers per hour, which continued until the phone was discarded about a kilometer from the attack site. Surveillance cameras along the biker's route captured footage of the motorcycle and identified the suspect as 32-year-old James Donald. Additionally, geolocation data from his mobile phone confirmed that, at the time of the attack, he was not with a friend, as he claimed, but near the crime scene. By this point, everyone was certain of his involvement in the murder. There was enough evidence to charge him with April's murder and proceed to court. However, a significant challenge remained: the lack of direct evidence. The police were unable to find any DNA linking James Donald to the victim. Of course, against this background, lawyers could effectively refer to indirectly provided evidence. Forensic experts were unable to find traces of the victim's blood on his belongings, equipment, or helmet. James Donald had meticulously cleaned everything and disposed of all incriminating items. It was clear that the man was highly experienced. In this case, the prosecutor's office decided to proceed with the charges despite relying on indirect evidence. These evidences was enough to convince the jury of James Donald's guilt in October 2014. 3 months after the crime, James was formally charged, and the trial was scheduled for early 2016. It was believed that he attacked a teenage girl. April. After she rejected his advances, James Donald had spent considerable time online researching ways to attract much younger girls, particularly minors, but none of the advice seemed to work. Tragically, when April refused him, he reacted violently and attacked her. The defense argued that the prosecution lacked definitive proof of James's guilt and claimed the case was built entirely on circumstantial evidence, although James maintained his innocence. His arguments were unconvincing. As a last resort, his lawyer emphasized that James Donald had no prior record of serious crimes. However, this was not enough to sway the jury. After several hours of deliberation, the jury unanimously found him guilty of attempted kidnapping, abuse, and first-degree murder. James Donald Van Callis was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the sentencing, April's mother spoke extensively. She expressed her satisfaction with the court's decision, relieved that the perpetrator would never be released. She was horrified that her child's life had been taken by an adult man simply because his advances were rejected. His actions and intentions were criminal from the start, but the level of cruelty he displayed was unimaginable. Despite this, James refused to admit his guilt or show any remorse. He continued to claim his innocence. Even after his conviction, he attempted to overturn the court's decision by filing an appeal with his lawyer, but it was unsuccessful. Now, he remains in prison for committing a heinous crime against an innocent young girl, April Millsap, in April's memory. A memorial garden was created near the spot where her life was tragically taken. A small statue of her dog, Penny, stands in the garden to honor the pet who led strangers to the scene of the crime. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Ashley Fallis. Ashley Fallis married her high school sweetheart right after finishing school, but their marriage lasted only a few years. During that time, she had 2 daughters. When the relationship ended, Ashley, just over 20 years old, she returned to her hometown with her children to live near her mother, Jenna, and stepfather, Joel. She found work as a respiratory therapist. Helping patients with breathing and heart issues became the sole provider for her family. Life was difficult, as her ex-husband was not involved in raising their daughters. Despite these hardships, Ashley was described by her mother and stepfather as cheerful, kind, and funny. She and her mother were particularly close, sharing a bond like best friends. In April 2007, Ashley met Tom Fallis, who seemed responsible and ready for family life. Unlike her ex-husband, their relationship progressed quickly, and a few months later, Ashley became pregnant with her 3rd child. 9 months later, they welcomed a son, Blake. 2 weeks after Blake's birth, Ashley and Tom got married. Tom also adopted Ashley's older daughters. However, Ashley's mother and stepfather felt she had rushed into having another child, like marrying Tom and entrusting him with her daughters. Despite knowing him for only a short time, the family settled in Evans, a small town about an hour north of Denver, Colorado. Ashley continued her work as a respiratory therapist, while Tom took a job as a correctional officer with the Weld County Sheriff's Office. Jenna admitted she found Tom strange from the start. She said, "I didn't like his mindset. He always thought he was right about everything." Tom came across as aggressive, hot-tempered, and controlling toward Ashley. Jenna often tried to convince Ashley to leave her relationship with Tom. Things took a dramatic turn when their youngest son, Blake, was diagnosed with hydrocephalus, a condition causing fluid to build up in the brain. Ashley became focused on researching treatment options for Blake, who had to undergo several major surgeries and required constant care. The stress severely affected Ashley, leaving her depressed, anxious, and irritable. Caring for Blake's health also put a heavy strain on Ashley and Tom's relationship, leading to frequent arguments. By the summer of 2011, Ashley started contemplating divorce. However, Tom encouraged her to seek help from a psychotherapist. After starting medication, Ashley's mental health improved, and their relationship appeared to stabilize by December 2011. The Fallis family decided to host a New Year's Eve party at their home, inviting family and friends. The preparations for the holiday provided a much distraction from their challenges. Just a few days before the celebration, Ashley discovered she was pregnant again. Filled with joy, she chose to stop taking her medication to protect the baby for a brief moment. It seemed things were improving for the Fallis family, and thoughts of divorce faded away. Unfortunately, their happiness was short-lived. On the afternoon of December 31, 2011, Ashley started bleeding and feared she was having a miscarriage. Despite her worry, she continued getting ready for the party. That evening, guests started arriving at the Fallis' home, including Tom's parents, Ashley's mother and stepfather, her uncle, and several family friends. The atmosphere was lively as everyone enjoyed chatting and celebrating together. However, tension between Tom and Ashley became evident. They exchanged harsh remarks and occasionally argued during the evening. Ashley confided in a friend, saying she always knew that Tom hates her. Despite the conflict, Ashley and Tom still celebrated the new year with their guests as the party wound down and people began leaving. Ashley's uncle offered her illegal substances. Tom overheard this and became enraged. He scolded Ashley and accused her of unacceptable behavior. In the heat of the argument, Tom revealed to everyone that Ashley's fourth pregnancy had ended earlier that day. He shouted that Ashley always followed her mother's advice rather than thinking for herself. After the quarrel, Ashley went to put her children to bed while her parents prepared to leave at 12:40 a.m. Ashley stepped outside to say goodbye to her mother and stepfather, noticing that Ashley seemed upset. Her mother, Jenna, asked what was wrong. Ashley responded, "It's okay, Mom, it's just Tom. He's like that." She hugged her parents goodbye while Tom stood on the porch, waving as they drove away. Afterward, Ashley and Tom went back inside the house, where the atmosphere was tense, following a brief argument about illegal substances. The two went their separate ways. Tom went into the wardrobe to change when he suddenly heard the sound of a weapon being loaded in the bedroom. Knowing Ashley kept a weapon under her mattress, Tom shouted, asking what was going on, and hurried toward the bedroom. Before he could reach her, he heard the explosion. Tom rushed into the room and found Ashley lying on the floor, smoke lingering in the air. She had been injured in the back of the head. In a panic, Tom grabbed her, pressed his hand against the wound to stop the bleeding, and called 911 at 12:50 a.m. as Ashley lay unconscious but still alive. Tom gently closed her eyes and spoke to her, saying, "I'm here. You won't go. You won't leave me." In the early hours of New Year's Day, 2012, the Evans Police Department responded to an emergency call from the Fallis family home. The neighborhood was known to be safe, with low crime rates. Upon arrival, paramedics rushed Ashley to the hospital due wound to her head. Unfortunately, her injuries were critical, and Ashley passed away a few hours later. The police detained Tom at the scene. He was covered in blood and claimed that his wife had self-harm. He also mentioned that Ashley and her mother had attended a party earlier that evening, and Ashley had been very upset, however. Suspicions quickly arose when a neighbor reported hearing screams from the house. The neighbor stated she heard Ashley screaming, begging Tom to get off her and let her go. During his interrogation, Tom denied the accusations. He stated that he did not witness his wife pulling the trigger and denied assaulting her. At any time during the interrogation, investigators asked Tom to undress so they could examine his body. They found fresh scratches on his chest. Tom explained the scratches by claiming he had injured himself while shaving his chest for the first time, which caused itching. Throughout the questioning, Tom appeared visibly nervous and anxious, but consistently denied having any physical contact with Ashley. In the Fallis bedroom, significant evidence suggested that a conflict had occurred. Photographs had been torn off the wall, hinting at a fight, and divorce papers were found displayed on the wall. Ashley also had bruises on her legs, according to Ashley's mother. Tom had been very angry with them when they said goodbye at the party. At the end of the party, he even shouted, "I want you all to die." Despite this evidence, Tom was released without charges. After the interrogation, Ashley's parents were heartbroken and couldn't understand why he was released so easily. Jenna was convinced that her daughter would never willingly leave her children. Ashley loved life and had plans for the future. On January 5, 2012, the medical examiner concluded that Ashley had died from a weapon wound to the back of the head and ruled it self-harm. 2 months later, the case was officially closed. Ashley's grieving parents struggled to accept this conclusion. Eventually, Tom and his children moved to Indiana, where he pursued graduate school. Despite their suspicions, Ashley's parents tried to maintain a good relationship with Tom to stay connected with their grandchildren. However, they never stopped believing that their daughter's death was caused by Tom. 2 years passed until, in early 2014, a local television reporter, Justin Joseph, began his own investigation into the Ashley Fallis case. Joseph spent months interviewing neighbors and investigating the case. After 4 months, the case took a significant turn. A young neighbor of Tom, his name is Nick Glover, revealed an important detail to Joseph. Nick and his mother, Kathy Glover, claimed he heard Tom yelling at his parents outside the house, saying, "God, I can't believe I did this." When his parents asked, "What are you saying?" Tom reportedly yelled, "I attacked her." Nick had informed the police immediately after the tragedy, and his statement was written down. However, no mention of Nick Glover's and Kathy account was found in the official police report. Joseph's report also uncovered another person who confirmed that Tom had confessed. A local police was present at the scene of the tragedy stated that Tom admitted to attack Ashley. Another neighbor also told the reporter that, on the night of the incident, she had called to the police, saying Tom attacked his wife. However, the police report misrepresented this information, stating instead that a woman had called to report that Ashley had self-harm. She also told the police that she had heard Ashley screaming from the Fallis family home, saying, "Leave me alone." Despite this, at that time, the neighbor was not questioned further, which was considered a serious omission since she was a key witness that night. Ashley's parents believed the police had rushed to close the case and blamed Ashley for her own death. Despite the circumstantial evidence, thanks to Joseph's investigative work, Chief Rick Brandt began to reevaluate the case and the actions of his officers, who had quickly hushed it up. This time, the Fort Collins Police Department took over the investigation. They considered the testimonies of the neighbors who heard Ashley screaming. Tom continued to deny his involvement in Ashley's death, maintaining that she had pulled the trigger herself on New Year's Eve. Curiously, more than 2 years after Ashley's death, Tom handed over to the police what he claimed was a suicide note written by Ashley. The note read, "Dear Tom, I am sorry for your pain. I am a loser in everything. I don't even love my daughters and son. I love you, but I just can't stand this life anymore." In November 2014, Tom Fallis was charged with the death of Ashley Fallis. He was detained and arrested in Indiana after 3 years of freedom, thinking he had escaped justice. In March 2016, a trial was held against Tom. During the trial, Tom's lawyer argued that he could not have killed his beloved wife, the mother of his 3 children. The lawyer claimed that Ashley had been struggling with mental health issues. He presented documents showing that Ashley had been diagnosed with a mental illness in the summer of 2011. The defense argued that she was impulsive, prone to self-destruction, and had been very drunk on the night of her death. They also claimed that she had suffered a miscarriage on New Year's Eve, further contributing to her distress. Ashley's uncle, however, stated that their family did not believe Ashley had taken her self-harm. They were convinced that Tom was responsible for her death. Ashley's therapist also insisted that his patient had no self-destructive tendencies. He confirmed that she was taking certain medications. However, the doctor did not know that. In addition to them, she was prescribed prescription medicine from other specialists. Ashley apparently hid another important thing from the doctor. information, including the alleged suicide notes she wrote. It turned out that Ashley had written 2 similar notes, one of which was dated July 24, 2011. Ashley's mother, Jenna, insisted that her daughter was fine. But Tom behaved inappropriately that night. He was overly angry and aggressive toward her and toward Ashley. Jenna said that at the end of the party, she watched as Tom walked up the stairs, stood right in front of Ashley, and told Ashley, "I hate you all, and I wish you all died." Then he went into the bedroom and slammed the door loudly. Rick also testified at the trial, confirming that he heard Tom confess to his parents that he attacked his wife. However, his parents denied this information and fully supported their son. A forensic expert who spent 400 hours studying the case explained to the jury where Ashley's head should have been when the explosion rang out. The expert claimed Ashley pulled the trigger herself. The prosecution called a second world-renowned forensic expert, who told the jury that he had come to the opposite conclusion from the previous medical examiner. In his opinion, Tom was next to Ashley at the time of the explosion, and most likely, there was a struggle between the spouses for the weapon, in which Tom won. The jury took only 3.5 hours to reach their verdict. Tom was found not guilty of second-degree murder and of all less serious crimes. Tom was free again. He refused to give any comments to journalists and the media. The jury explained that they believed that Ashley was mentally ill, which is why she self-harmed. Ashley's parents still don't believe that their daughter could abandon 3 children and voluntarily end her life. They are very upset that Tom was released. Ashley's 2 daughters and son remained under the care of Tom and live in Indiana, and Ashley's parents, Jenna and Joel, received the legal right to see their grandchildren. Hello again, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Michael Weiss. Jake Nolan was born in New York, USA, as the youngest child in his family, with an older brother and an older sister. The family lived on Long Island and was relatively wealthy. Jake was known for being kind and respectful to everyone. However, at the age of 5, he was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. This condition affected him throughout his life, becoming more evident at the age of 15 when he began to experience mood swings. Despite facing many challenges, Jake had some positive moments in high school, including being recognized for winning a competition. However, this was also when he was diagnosed with anxiety and depression at the age of 17. Jake was hospitalized after a disturbing incident involving his parents after an argument. He threatened to commit end life with a kitchen knife. During this time, he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, a serious condition. His parents tried to help him manage his health problems and regularly consulted specialists, but their efforts were not very successful. Jake was prescribed about 30 different medications. This alone led to serious side effects, often leaving him feeling worse than before. Many of the medications interacted negatively with each other, resulting in poor treatment outcomes during this time. Jake also began drinking and using drugs. When Jake started college, his parents hoped he would improve. At first, everything seemed fine, but then they received a worried call from the school. The dean wanted to know why Jake had been absent for the past 2 weeks. That's when his parents discovered that he had been in bed most of the time. His depression worsened, and he began using illegal drugs regularly. This alarmed his family, who wanted to help him. But even at 19, Jake showed no interest in studying or working. Instead, he spent all his time having fun and avoiding responsibility. One day, Jake's mother spoke to her niece, Pamela Buckbinder, a successful psychiatrist in New York by her 40s. Pamela had won numerous awards and occasionally published articles in popular magazines. Concerned about Jake, Pamela offered to take him into her home for a while and set up a makeshift rehab facility there. She promised to organize therapy sessions for Jake and monitor his medication instead of charging him for her help. Pamela asked Jake to assist her in caring for her 4-year-old son during the summer, due to their family ties. They agreed to her plan. Pamela and Jake are cousins, and she saw this as an opportunity to strengthen their family bond while helping to care for her son. When Jake's mother shared this with him, he viewed it as a break from his family and agreed to stay with Pamela for a few months, during which he would help care for her son. Pamela's husband is another prominent psychiatrist, Michael Weiss. Pamela and Michael had a rocky relationship. They often argued and got into physical fights. In one incident, Pamela was arrested for throwing a glass at Michael, causing a head injury that required stitches. Pamela argued that they were both equally at fault, as Michael was also arrested after another altercation and was accused of threatening her. Pamela and Michael ended their relationship in 2009, after which Pamela moved to Greenwich Village in Manhattan in 2011. They began a custody battle during this time. Pamela often spoke ill of Michael to their son, portraying him as a bad father. She also spread false and damaging stories about him to others, apparently trying to turn the child and others against him. This behavior was primarily intended to gain an advantage in the custody dispute and secure a substantial child support payment. By 2012, the couple finally reached an agreement that allowed Michael to spend weekends with their children. However, an unusual condition imposed by Pamela was that Michael purchase a life insurance policy on himself, naming their son Calder as the beneficiary, with Pamela as the trustee. Eventually, Michael, exhausted from the legal battle, reluctantly agreed to this questionable request. The custody battle reached its final stages after Jake moved into Pamela's home. Jake began sharing his thoughts and struggles with Pamela, who gave him advice, monitored his medications, and made his life much easier. Jake became the godfather to Pamela's son Calder, and often said that the experience gave his life meaning. On November 12, 2012, Michael spent the day with his son, Calder, for the first time. He felt excited because he had reached an agreement with Pamela about custody, allowing him to interact with Calder without stress. Michael's schedule that morning was to take Calder to kindergarten and then go to work. In the afternoon, Calder would return home to his mother, while Michael was attending a therapy session with a patient. Jake appeared at the door with a worried look on his face and carrying a large bag. Michael realized that Jake knew he had moved in with Pamela and was dealing with some mental health issues. However, Michael was unsure about the current situation because he was with a patient. He asked Jake to wait outside until he finished. When the therapy session ended, Michael found Jake still waiting in the hallway. Dr. Michael asked him about the large bag. Jake claimed that it contained important documents for Calder's kindergarten that he had helped Pamela prepare. However, Michael was skeptical about this explanation. Michael asked Jake to leave the bag outside because he was worried that Jake might plant a listening device there. However, Jake insisted he couldn't leave the bag behind as it could be stolen. Eventually, Michael relented and allowed Jake to bring the bag inside with him upon entering the office. Jake asked to use the restroom first. Later, he attacked Michael with a sledgehammer. Fortunately, Michael avoided a fatal blow to the head, but Jake struck him in the shoulder. Jake then lost his balance because the sledgehammer was too heavy, dropped it, and pulled out a knife to attack Michael. Michael fought back, pushed Jake away, tried to run into the hallway, and called for help. People gathered in the hallway, and shortly after, Michael passed out from blood loss. Witnesses called the police and paramedics. Jake, however, didn't attempt to flee. Instead, he sat in the hallway and took pictures. When the paramedics arrived, they found Michael unconscious and Jake sitting beside him. Jake told the paramedics that Michael had attacked him first. Meanwhile, both Michael and Jake were taken to the hospital, where they were placed under police supervision. Forensic experts retrieved the sledgehammer and knife from Michael's office. Upon examination, they found a DNA sample on the handle of the sledgehammer that matched Jake's, The knife was also analyzed and determined to have come from Pamela's kitchen, inside a large bag belonging to Jake. The police found a pack of cigarettes, zip ties, and a hand-drawn map of the building where Michael worked, showing multiple entrances and exits. The police traced the bag to a purchase near Pamela's home. They reviewed surveillance footage from a nearby hardware store and observed that Jake had bought the sledgehammer used in the attack, along with zip ties and a bag. The night before, Pamela was seen next to him, paying cash for the items, possibly aware of the planned crime. Although Michael suffered multiple injuries, none were life-threatening. Jake was taken to the hospital but was released on $200 bail while awaiting a hearing on the attempted murder charge. He is allowed to stay with his parents in Miami. Jake spoke to the police and claimed that the attack was self-defense, stating that Michael had taken Jake's sledgehammer and tried to injure himself when Jake realized that his lie was not convincing. He decided to tell the police the truth about what had happened. He accused Pamela of being the real mastermind, claiming that she had manipulated him and turned him against Michael. Pamela then provided the police with Jake's medical history, which indicated that he had suffered from a number of serious mental health issues. The police investigated Jake's testimony, and evidence supporting his claim quickly emerged. Pamela had an ulterior motive to harm her ex-husband. In November 2013, Michael Weiss filed a lawsuit against Pamela, alleging that his ex-wife pressured him into taking out $1 million life insurance policy. He pointed out that the attack occurred just 4 days after the contract was issued, which raised suspicions. Michael believed that this was a planned plot to benefit Pamela financially. Additionally, Jake's attorney secured a restraining order against Pamela, arguing that it was necessary to protect Jake's mental health from her influence. Despite the overwhelming evidence against Pamela, she was not arrested or questioned, and her medical license remained intact. Meanwhile, the investigation continued, and an expert was brought in to analyze the building blueprints found in Jake's bag. It was revealed that Pamela had drawn the blueprints, but she claimed that the maps were for Jake to find Michael and pick up Calder if necessary. Pamela was in regular contact with Jake before and after the attempted assassination. Their text messages showed that she was aware of his whereabouts and what was going on. After Jake sent a selfie to Michael following the attempted assassination, they had a long conversation that revealed the plan had failed. Jake expressed guilt for not being able to kill Michael during this time. Jake fully admitted his actions and showed a willingness to accept the consequences, no matter how severe they might be. He told detectives that Pamela had convinced him to kill Michael to free her from an abusive relationship that was harming both her and her young son at the time. Jake was so close to the boy that he wanted to help his relatives get rid of Michael. He did not know that Michael's life was insured for a significant amount of money and that Pamela could benefit from the insurance payout. Jake did not care about the money because his family supported him. However, Pamela manipulated him to the point that he was willing to do anything for her. Unfortunately, the case did not progress. Even after 2 years, the situation remained unchanged. As of 2015, Pamela was still living comfortably at home with her son, sharing custody with Michael, as there was no evidence to prove her involvement in the attempted murder. Meanwhile, Jake is in Miami, receiving comprehensive care, and his condition begins to improve as he starts to regain his sanity. Jake realizes that he has become a pawn in Pamela's scheme. Devoted to caring for her child and managing household responsibilities, he understands that Pamela never intended to help him. Instead, she aimed to use him for her own dubious purposes. Jake has overcome his harmful habits and envisions a future where he can start a family and raise children. However, he faces the serious possibility of being imprisoned for years due to the betrayal of someone he once trusted. Additionally, questions begin to arise regarding the nature of Jake's relationship with Pamela, which seems to extend beyond simple family support and therapeutic assistance. Their interactions resemble typical affectionate exchanges between newlyweds, and a photo of them together in bed has surfaced. It appears that Pamela is pursuing Jake with the intent of deepening their relationship. Possibly to manipulate him, Pamela recounted a fabricated story of having endured physical violence throughout her marriage. She eventually accused Michael of trying to gain custody of their son. Over time, Jake grew to believe her, insisting that he would do anything for Pamela. She convinced him that in order to survive, he needed to eliminate Michael. It was clear that Pamela was not strong enough to confront a robust adult man, making Jake a suitable candidate for her dangerous scheme. The trial began in March 2016, where the jury was presented with a detailed account of the events that took place on November 12, 2012. Jake recalled Pamela waking him up that morning, insisting that it was time to put their plan into action. She showered him with compliments, calling him her savior. After breakfast, she continued her manipulations. On November 11, they purchased a sledgehammer, zip ties, and a bag in preparation for their plan. The details of the plot were far more sinister than the events that transpired in Michael's office. Initially, Jake was supposed to attack Michael and torture him before he died. Pamela wanted Michael to suffer for as long as possible. Jake then went to Michael's office, entering through the service entrance, where security cameras recorded his arrival. Remarkably, he made no attempt to conceal his identity. With confidence, he walked down the hallway and approached Michael's office. At the time, Michael was examining a patient, forcing Jake to step back and wait outside. Jake was in the hallway. Rethinking his actions, he soon realized that if he backed out now, he wouldn't be able to face Pamela. There was no turning back. So he carried out the attack. While awaiting trial, Jake undergoes evaluations from several psychiatrists, who noted that he was fully aware of his actions. Concluding that his decision to kill Michael was intentional, the jury deliberated and found Jake Nolan guilty of attempted murder. He was sentenced to 9.5 years in prison, while Pamela remained free on bail. This changed on October 19, 2017, when the police attempted to arrest Pamela and urged her to turn herself in, but she ignored their requests. When the search began, she could not be found at any known address and did not answer her cell phone or work phone. An anonymous source eventually informed the police of Pamela's whereabouts, and she was arrested at a friend's home. Pamela was charged with second-degree intentional homicide and first-degree assault. On September 7, 2022, Pamela Buchbinder admitted guilty to these charges to avoid a 25-year sentence. However, on October 11 of that year, she attempted to withdraw her guilty plea, claiming that she had been under the influence of illegal drugs and had been assaulted by security guards. Her request to withdraw her guilty plea was denied. Ultimately, Pamela was sentenced to 11 years in prison, and her medical license was officially revoked. Jake felt deep remorse for his actions. His parents firmly believed in his innocence and were convinced that Pamela was responsible for his condition. Jake's parents stated that sending Jake to Pamela's home for treatment was the worst decision they ever made. Pamela, however, continued to maintain her innocence. The child's father, Michael, was granted custody.